Hey, Hare Krishna, Duvid here. We are live with Eric Wayne Crosley, Antariksa Das, my friend here from Metro Detroit, who I met one of the first times I came to Detroit ISKCON. In fact, when I came there, he was the one giving the regular Sunday class, and he was the senior devotee living in the ashram. And we had tens of hours of conversation. I was very interested in ISKCON and the philosophy, and so he was probably the main senior devotee who talked to me in the beginning, most specifically about vegetarianism. And it turned out historically, when I was at the time, I was helping out going to the downtown synagogue, which now has Rabbi Silverman as the rabbi. But at the time, there was no rabbi, just a few people. And Rabbi Dorit was the main. She wasn't officially the rabbi, but she was helping out and working out of the synagogue, and she had DION, the Detroit Interfaith Network, and I was doing my best to help her out with that, and I was able to put Antariska Das in to represent the Hare Krishna, which Dorit was familiar with and had a positive view. And first time he came, Deva Madhava Das did Harinam, and Akanta Prabhu was there. And we had a picture together in the Detroit Jewish News. I was looking for it. I have some of those behind me, but I couldn't find it. But since then, Antariksa Das has been a regular in Detroit Interfaith. I have on my channel. He got the whole Temple Bethel, the Sabbath to chant around Hare Krishna. He has been at tens of interfaith events, many of them on my channel around in Metro Detroit. And he has now moved on to, besides for being ISKCON representative in East Lansing, Michigan State University, and having ashram in his house in East Lansing, which I've been to. I have pictures on my Facebook, to founding Leon, like Dion in Lansing. So I would like to, people who watch my channel may have seen him in IRL videos that I put on my channel where he's spoken in churches or synagogues at various places, but due to COVID-19, here he is. To anyone who watches, a great honor to have him. I thought I would let him open with, as usual, a mantra, and then allow him to give his full, bio spiritual transformation of how, this man, Mr. Crosley from Indiana, came to be a promoter of Krishna consciousness. So please, honor to have you.
Thank you so much, David, for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for a while. And before I get started with sharing with your audience how I became a devotee, I want to chant prayers to my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Desatarane Om Jnana Timrandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksha Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master is kindly forcing open my darkened eyes with the burning torchlight of transcendental knowledge. I offer my most respectful obeisances unto him. I'm from Indiana, as David pointed out, so I'm a Hoosier all the way. 26 years down there in Hoosier land, so you can probably still hear the Hoosier twang in my voice. I'm from a small town, Indiana, 2,500 people from my whole childhood up till I was 18. It's grown somewhat now, but it was very stable at the time. And I was an athlete, and I got my straight A's because I was a little, big fish, little fish in a big pond, big fish in a little pond, put it that way, or whatever. So I decided to go to Indiana University. I was in pre-med for a year. I studied at the same chemistry department where Crick and Watson discovered the double helix. So it was a very prestigious place, actually, in that sense. And I did pretty well. I had trouble at first semester, because I was going to school with the same 150 people from the time I was in first grade to the 12th grade. Same 150 people, never changed for 12 years. And all of a sudden I had 10,000 classmates in my freshman class at Indiana University in 1968. So it was a little bit tough at first, but I got used to it. And but I changed my major from medicine to social work. And I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but my father said at that point he stopped trying to understand me, because that's how he envisioned me as his child, to be a doctor or a dentist. And but I was not interested in going in that path. And so I did finally finish my degree in social work in 1973, but several things happened before then. I was introduced to psychic depression. I had no idea what psychic depression was. I had a very stable childhood growing up. I never really felt discouraged and depressed and stuck. But after the end of my junior year as an undergraduate, I became a victim of that. I was very much I started a thing called the Bloomington Poetry. The Bloomington Poetry Workshop was one of the things I started, but another thing I started as an undergraduate was the Indiana University Council to Repeal the Draft, because I was interested in the concept of coercion. And I got obsessed with it. I ran that institution for 2.5 years. And then in my junior year, it became pretty clear to me, we're not going to get this changed. And that was depressing. And then some love affairs didn't go the way I wanted them to. And one thing led to another. I was a very straight-laced kid. I never used alcohol even in high school. But when I got to IU, I started imbibing because that was around me. Marijuana was around me, but I never even used any of that. So at the end of my junior year, I had a nervous breakdown dealing with the growing realization I was having that what I wanted about the world wasn't going to change. And also dealing with my identity. This is a question about who in the hell am I? Was very difficult. So anyways, I made it through that by God's grace. I didn't give up. And it was very hellish. I mean, I'm a reader and a writer. I love to read and write, like people that have that propensity, that God gives that propensity. It's really rewarding to read and to express yourself. And I had found that. But then when the depression came, that I knew nothing about, experientially, I was introduced to a space where I couldn't even read or write. It was pure hell. At least it was hell on earth. That was how I understood hell on earth. And I didn't give up. Even though I tried to commit suicide twice with Thorazine. Thorazine doesn't kill you; it just puts you to sleep for a long time. So I slept it off both times in the fall of 1971, and I made it through that. But one of the ways I made it through it was resolving. I'm gonna figure this out. Who I am. And at the time, I thought it was a question: was I man or woman? That's what identity meant to me at the time. And so I decided, well, I'm more of a woman than a man. I was transgendered. And so I went back to undergraduate work, fired up, fixed, focused. And so that's what I did. And to make a long story short, because we haven't got so much time, I was convinced that the path I needed to take was to have my sex reassigned. And I did that. I finished my undergraduate degree in one term after I went back in 1972. I immediately took a job as a dishwasher, not because I wanted to be a dishwasher, but because Indiana University food service system had excellent health insurance. That's why I did what I did. And so I got my hormone doctor. It's a standard procedure. I got my note after 3 months of working as a dishwasher. I established myself as a good worker. I brought my note here. I'm a transgender person at the time, as transsexual, and part of the process is you got to start living in the assigned role. So one day I was using the men's restroom, the next the women's restroom in 1973 Southern Indiana with very little trouble, matter of fact. There was trouble, but not very much. And so after that, I worked for another 2 or 3 months, and I wrote my letter to Blue Cross and Blue Shield. I said, I need help. I can't pay for this. I have a medical condition, and I'm working with the Cleveland Clinic. Can you help me? They came back and they said, no, we don't cover cosmetic surgery. And I agreed with that. I said, okay, good enough. But I said, what about if I tell you it's functional? And that defeated them. And I had full Blue Cross and Blue Shield coverage of the Cleveland Clinic for 3 years. And I was only 3 months away from having surgery in March of 1976. But I was starting to have doubts about the wisdom. I could not deny it. And a housemate of mine at the time went out and brought back a little book called 10 Upanishads. I'd never heard of the Upanishads. And in the beginning of that book, it mentioned the chief Upanishads, an Upanishad called the Gita Upanishad. So I was interested because here's a book talking about many lifetimes, the soul being eternal, karma, the science of activity, consciousness, so many things. So there was a store in Bloomington, Indiana, where I had been living at the time for almost 6 years. It's called Caveat Emptor, Buyer Beware. And I went there to get a Gita Upanishad, but there was a woman walking into the store in front of me with a whole slew of books in her arms. On the very top of that stack of maybe 10 books, there was a book called the Bhagavad Gita As It Is. So I asked her a rhetorical question. Are you bringing these books back to sell them to the store? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, I'm looking for what I thought was called the Gita Upanishad, but that's close enough. Would you like to sell that book to me? And she goes, sure. How much? $3. And so I gave her $3. And that's how I met Srila Prabhupada in this lifetime. So I was very fortunate. I read the full book full through in about a week. And I knew this is the truth I've been looking for. This is the person I've been looking for. Martin Luther King was my first real mentor outside of high school life because I was raised as a Christian, but in Pendleton, Indiana, my growing up, I went to church on Sunday, and there's no relationship between that and the rest of the 6 days, basically, not very little. But here is a gentleman, Martin Luther King, that brought the tenets of Christianity down to social activity, social action, and social change, and how to live together, how to create the beloved community. So I had already met Martin Luther King as a great mentor for me, but I became very discouraged with him even because of certain questions I had that he wasn't talking about. But here was a book, the Bhagavad Gita As It Is, you might call it the Bible of the Hindu world. It's talking about, there's 5 topics, as most people probably that watch this broadcast know: God, us, the individual being, karma, the science of activity, what is matter, and the 5th topic, which I ask people sometimes to try to guess it, they can't, time. Those 5 topics covers all of existence. And so I started reading that. But then the question became, what am I going to do with my scheduled secretary assignment surgery? And it was a tough one. But I decided, well, if I'm not this body, why am I spending so much time changing it to try to be happy changing my body? So I stopped the process and sold all. It was a very rough period, 3 or 4 months, but the Bhagavad Gita is very compelling. And I had to follow my heart. My heart was saying, you got to find some devotees that are studying this book and living in an ashram, practicing this knowledge. And so that became Ann Arbor, Michigan. My first contact with a real live devotee was Bhaddi Narayan. He's now Bhaddi Narayan Swami. And he took me in, basically into the temple he had established in Ann Arbor, Michigan in July of 76. But I want to put a little dig towards Bhaddi Narayan and myself. I didn't ask him where Prabhupada was. Prabhupada was actually in Detroit, Michigan at the Devasiddhan Mandir temple in June of 1976. I didn't ask Bhadri, he didn't tell me. So I missed Prabhupada by 10 days, getting personal darshan, because I came to Ann Arbor on July 7, 1976. And I never got to have personal darshan, what we call Vapu, with Sri Prabhupada in this lifetime. I asked my dear elder godbrother, Guru Das, one time, I said, Guru Das, I've read your book, The Wit and Wisdom of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I've loved the pastimes you were allowed to have with Srila Prabhupada, how you got to serve him. What do you make of the fact that I didn't ever get to have any vapu with him? You know what he told me? He said, you didn't need it. That's easy for him to say. He got so much. But the truth is that you can have vapu association with a great personality and not even be there with them. The way that you really connect with your spiritual master is through following his or her instructions and making that your life and soul. And so I was able to do that, for 4 or 5, 6 years. I actually took initiation with 3 other devotees, David Siddham Mandir, in August 30th, 1977, just a few weeks before Prabhupada left the planet. And then when he left the planet, as many people know that know the Hare Krishna movement, when a great personality leaves, there's always going to be trouble. And
just for historical note, there was Jayatirtha who conducted the initiation ceremony on behalf of Prabhupada, for people who are familiar with that.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. Jayatirtha was probably the person I was closest to.
From England.
No, he's from this country.
Okay. Yeah, I had Henry Doktorsky on. He was one of the original initiating people that was put in London, but I guess from America. We don't have to get too off topic. I just wanted to make that historical note.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, it was Jayatirtha that held the fire sacrifice on behalf of Srila Prabhupada. And so anyways, when the zonal acharya thing manifested, I became confused. And it wasn't just that. It was many things. I had been blessed to get married, and I had a child with a beautiful devotee, and I still have a good relationship with my son. His name is Prema Bhakti Crosley, and he has 2 daughters. I'm actually in Crosley speak in Indiana, we call a grandfather a papu. So yours truly is now a papu. I have 2 beautiful granddaughters named Sophia, who's 6, just turned 6, and her little sister Ella, who just turned 4.
Congratulations on that.
So I want to segue now into talking about interfaith, or
well, you can. You're still in 1976, so
70. Okay, let me tell you what happened. Let me go.
You gave a little bit of your history and your reassignment surgery, and then coming on to Krishna consciousness meeting in Ann Arbor, where I went to school, University of Michigan, to your initiation ceremony in Detroit. So that leads to Eric getting here in Detroit in 1976 till when I meet him in the 2010 or later 2015.
Yeah, that's a lot of time, isn't it?
Or something. But I think a lot happened between then.
Okay, so let me
he goes out to he eventually he becomes a preacher and tries to open up temples for ISKCON in Kalamazoo and then East Lansing.
Yes, well, Jayatirtha was a very wonderful devotee. Prabhupada gave him the responsibility to take over Spiritual Sky Incense, and Jayatirtha turned it into a multi-million-dollar operation. He was a he's my favorite older devotee. I was prejudiced because that's who I was interacting with, but we always had a good time. And I'll tell you, interesting thing that happened, another personality that still lives here in Lansing, Michigan. He spends a lot of time in India too. That's Sri Kumar Podar. And I happened to be at the lunch program at the Hare Krishna Temple on Grove Street when Jayatirtha was there, and Sri Kumar Podar was sitting with Jayatirtha, and he asked Jayatirtha, why don't you guys distribute the BTG through the mail? And Jayatirtha goes, that's a damn good idea. And that's when it started, because of that influence. But anyways, when I was, Jayatirtha wanted to know if I wanted to get married, and I was interested in getting married, even though I had my transsexual background, and I was instructed I had to talk to my possible wife to be about that, and which I did. And I found a very nice young female devotee. Her name was Ananga Manjari. Became Vaikuntha Sundari because of changes in the movement. But anyway, Jayatirtha sent my ex-wife and I with her daughter, my stepdaughter, Julianne, to open a temple in Kalamazoo, which we did. And I had a great, very nice time. It allowed me to use so many different skills that when I was a brahmachari for 3 years, I basically did fundraising, and book distribution, which I liked a lot, book distribution and having classes and talking philosophy more than just raising funds. But that's all. You got to raise funds in this world. It's part of it. And it can be spiritual too. It might not be what you're suited for necessarily, but I did that and I learned how to do it. And I did it well. And so I was able to go to Kalamazoo, though, being sent there by Jayatirtha with my wife and my stepdaughter. And we successfully opened up a nice little temple. And I was even able to sit down with the president of Western Michigan University twice to talk to him about Prabhupada's books, and actually presented, both times. I think Bhagavad Gita as it is the first time, and a Bhagavatam the second time. But after about 8 or 9 months, I got a death threat. Somebody called up and said, we're watching you. You got our cousin. I got a shotgun. It wasn't a very pleasant thing, but I didn't want to leave. But Jayatirtha got wind of that somehow. And that, in conjunction with, he wanted one strong temple outside of Detroit rather than 2 weaker temples. He thought that it would be important for Ann and I, Vaikuntha Sundari and I, to close the temple in Kalamazoo and move to Lansing, which we did. My ex-wife was 6 months pregnant with our son, Prema Bhakti, and he was born. Prema Bhakti was born in an apartment building right there on Grove Street, in the Grove Street Temple. And we had a home birth, and that's another story, but it worked out very well. And I got to catch my son coming out and cut the cord and hold him on my chest. And it's very, very blessed thing. And I owe that all to Prabhupada. I hadn't met Prabhupada, God knows what hellish planet I would be on, but it didn't work out that way. And so at that point, we carried on there. Prema was born, and I raised funds, and I started actually a program at the prison. The temple in East Lansing got a 10-page letter from an inmate at Michigan Jackson State College, or State Jail, prison, and I wrote a 10-page letter back. And I met this whole group of inmates that wanted to go to India and start a community on their own. They had gotten hold of Prabhupada books and other books on Eastern religion, and they were fired up, and they were intelligent. They were wonderful to work with, and I was able to overcome being discriminated against by the Islamic folks and the Christian folks. We don't need no Hare Krishna devotee in here. So by Krishna's grace, I was able to establish a little ministry there, which I ran for almost 2 years. But then when Jayatirtha started having trouble, I started having trouble with my marriage, because I started thinking, had I made a mistake earlier on? It was just a very confusing and challenging time. And I ended up going through divorce. We moved out of the temple with my mom and dad bought my ex-wife and I a small house trailer, which we moved out into. We had every intention of going to the temple, keeping in touch. But Maya is so powerful that if you really aren't serious, if you're not careful, Maya can take you down into darkness just like that. And that's what happened to me. And I basically didn't practice Krishna consciousness for 18 years, a long time. I never regretted coming in contact with the devotees at all. Didn't regret it a bit, because I had found a whole different body of literature that I never knew existed. And I met so many interesting people, and I had experiences where I was convinced that Krishna was God, but Maya shook me so heavy, I started having this thought. This is instructive.
Maybe some of Eric's accomplishments when he wasn't a devotee was what made me kind of like him when I first met, or at least feel that he maybe could offer somewhat advice. Or, I was in university. I think he goes on, and I don't know if he got a PhD, but he becomes a professor of creative writing. Yeah. And, I haven't written much, and I wanted to write. So he had a professor of creative writing. He also ran for Congress. In Michigan. So interesting that he was able to successfully at least make a bid and lose. an election for Congress. So those are interesting accomplishments that he did during his non-devotee years.
Another thing that I'd like to share is that I worked I was blessed to work in the prisons for 3 years as a professor. And many of my students were black men from Detroit. And I challenged them. I'm going to learn more from you than you do from me. And I think I probably did. Many of my students had committed rape or murder or assault as teenagers, some of them. And now they were 30 and 40, 45, 50 years old, and they had accepted their fate. I asked them, so how do you do this? They said, well, you just accept your fate and you make the best use of a bad bargain. And that's exactly what Prabhupada used to say about being in the material world at all. Make the best use of a bad bargain. And one of my students was a Buddhist. He had a book that said, we're all doing time. So those 3 years as an educator in the prison system, I tell people this often, were the most exciting and powerful educational experiences I ever had. It was just wonderful because they knew that I didn't look at them as just criminals and inmates. They knew that I looked at them as no different than myself. We're just struggling souls. Your fate is you got to be in prison. My fate is I'm in prison outside the prison. So what's
Bhagavata 6.9? I don't know if you even know that one in Sanskrit, but the devotee who looks at all things equal.
Yeah. Oh,
Bhagavata 6.9 that I first heard from you, but I was quoting that to myself the other day.
Yeah, the Bhagavad Gita, Dave and I could talk. Dave and I have had discussions for 5 hours straight many times. And Dave's one of my favorite people because he's born into the Jewish world. He is a rabbi. Without being a rabbi, he's a rabbi. That's how I look at it. Without being a rabbi, he's a rabbi.
I knew enough about Judaism. I'm involved in Judaism and knew enough to teach, and I mean, not an official capacity of a rabbi, but and I'm also the one who introduced Antariksa to Rabbi Dorit, who had some official capacity to interfaith organization.
That was in 2011, I believe.
So what year did you become a devotee?
Okay, well, let me carry on the string there.
I mean, what year are we talking about now?
Okay, we're talking now. This is 1997, and I have been a professor for 3 years inside the prison system for 1 year with Jackson Community College, but the England administration was holding back their pay for 3 months to collect extra interest or whatever, but they got fed up and they stopped educating inmates. They got out of the business after being involved for 30 some years. But several of us got hired right away again by Montcalm Community College, and I worked for them for the last 2 years of my tenure inside the prisons. And what happened basically at the end was I can do pretty crazy things. And I decided, well, I'm living as Eric out here in my hometown of Lansing, Michigan, and I'm teaching as Eric in here. And so I brought my master's thesis to my last class I was teaching after 3 years. I passed it around. They go, Crosley, we're inmates. This is no big deal. But I was naive about what kind of deal it was going to be for the administrators. And basically, there was a gentleman that was a warden of Egler facility, and he decided that I was setting a poor moral example for my inmates, even though they disagreed with him. So I was discriminated against. I could go into the long story, but basically, for 4 years, I had 3 defendants: Michigan Department of Corrections, Montcalm Community College, and Lansing School District, all taxpayer-supported entities, which were standing in discrimination against me because I was transgendered. I never got my day in court, although I carried on for 4 years. And the last person that got one of my defendants dropped was the to-be governor of Michigan, Jennifer Granholm. She ran for Attorney General with Jeffrey Feiger in 1998. Feiger lost, and she won. So when my case came to the 30th Circuit Court to a certain point, it was her responsibility to respond to my allegations. And she made an argument in front of Judge Houck of the 30th Circuit Court, some sophisticated argument about standing, which is important in the law. And Judge Houck dropped my defendant the Michigan Department of Corrections. He didn't drop it against Lansing School District and Montcalm Community College, but I'd already fought 4 years. And then 9/11 happened. And I jumped real quick there. After that 4-year legal battle, I actually had surgery done in December of 2000. And then I got hired after that to teach argumentative writing at Lansing Community College. And then 9/11 happened, and I'm an old hippie, that I'm a peacenik. How am I going to talk to my students who are basically young, conservative, mid-Michigan students? How am I going to even talk to them about this? And I kind of went too far by saying things happen for a reason. But that wasn't the main thing going on in my life. What the main thing going on in my life was Krishna getting me down enough where I would start to chant Hare Krishna again. So what happened is I started getting depressed. 9/11, I actually was on the Judge Joe Brown show out in, it's another part of the story. I consulted with 2 of my best friends, David. I said, what should I do with this opportunity? They want to fly me out to Hollywood, put me on TV, and if I win, they'll pay it. If I lose, I don't have to pay anything. They'll put me, and one of my mentors or one of my dear, deep friends said, what do you got to lose? And the other said, don't dare do that. So I said, I want what you got to lose. And so I had the experience. Judge Joe Brown goes, I think you're running a flop house. And he ruled in favor of a person that I won't say her name. She's a nice person. She's a young person, but she's the one that got the opportunity to go to Judge Joe Brown's show. So that was only about 2 weeks after 9/11. So that, in conjunction with just my own journey, I had a sleepless night in November. And that hadn't happened for a long. I knew I was in trouble, and that led to depression. I was able to finish that course. Those 3 classes I was able to finish, but I could not carry on. And that led to me putting myself in the hospital. I tried to commit suicide in March. I'll never forget it. March 4th of 2002. And I was in the hospital for 18 days, and my doctor, Dr. Barbario, it sounds like a fiction, but it's not. He said, well, the PR people are on my bottom, and you're going to be okay. You got a good network out there. So he kicked me out. And nothing happened immediately other than me not giving up. And it became May of 2002, and I was still struggling like hell. I had a good psychiatrist. I had a good social worker from that experience. But I saw my beads right here in this very room, up in the top of my I said, maybe I should try chanting Hare Krishna again. And nothing happened immediately. But my dog at the time, Sapphire, and I went out to a place called Scott Woods here in Lansing, Michigan, and I started chanting Hare Krishna again, slowly. Nothing happened immediately, but I kept with it. And I started experiencing some rasa, some taste. And I was on my way. It wasn't immediate. I didn't associate again with devotees in Detroit until 2006. That's how careful I was, or how reluctant I was, or how scared I was, whatever word you want to use. But finally, after teaching for 3 years with Jackson Community College on the outside and running for Congress, running for Congress, I got in over my head, quite frankly. I didn't really want to do it, but I felt compelled to put my money where my mouth was, because I'd always told my students, you got to get involved in civic life. That doesn't mean you have to run for Congress. You don't have to. At least you got to vote. If you're in a democracy, you don't have to vote. But if you don't vote, don't bitch. Exercise your power, and get involved, however you want. If you say democracy is not the best system of government, then argue for it. Just don't bitch and don't do anything, And so what happened was, basically I had the nomination wrapped up to the last minute. A guy named Jim Marzinkowski, who was involved in the Navarre Plain affair, which was related to basically the invasion of Iraq was done on some people call false basis, where Saddam Hussein was accused of having weapons of mass destruction. In the process of all that happening, Jim Marzinkowski was involved in a way where he got so ticked off at the Republican Party, he became a Democrat. He happened to be in my district, and he happened to want to run for Congress. So when he was available to the Democratic Party, I just bye-bye. That's what happened. And I had to accept that. He was a nice guy. He had some good qualities, and I talked with him. I wouldn't, who am I? But I had a good experience running for that, but, my career working for Jackson Community College on the outside, I was an adjunct. I wasn't making very much money, and I got involved in politics there, and I got on the wrong side of history in a sense there, and so I didn't lose my job, but I got my work reduced way down. And anyways, I said, well, maybe I should go to Detroit. In the spring of 2006, I went to Detroit to meet the devotees. And the first person I saw was my old friend, Lisa Ruther. There was a Istagosa going on in Nataji Hall.
I had originally thought that like a 15-minute bio.
Okay.
And we're over
idea.
30 minutes now, but no, I think this is important, especially people who don't know much about the history of Detroit ISKCON, and obviously Elizabeth Ruther. Everyone today knows about Alfred Ford, Ambrish Ford, who is one of the most famous devotees in the world. But historically, Elizabeth Ruther was almost equally important in the rise of Detroit ISKCON. So feel free to give that history.
Yeah. So the first person there was Lakers of my old buddy, Lakers Avanti, they're having Istagosa right there. And so I started speaking with her, and we actually had, even before, we had went out on Sankirtan together before that time, a lot of water been under the bridge. I was now 56 years old in 2006. And but I came into where the movement was at that point in time. And I got involved in doing book distribution. I'm a writer, so I was invited to write a piece on book distribution, which you can go back in the archives in the Rath Yatra, which is a Belle Isle, in 2007. There's a full page spread, It's by Antariksa Das. It's all about Prabhupada, the importance of distributing Prabhupada's books and studying Prabhupada's books and trying to apply Prabhupada's books. That was in 2007, but me being me, I have a certain understanding of Prabhupada's instructions, and other devotees have theirs, and thus it will always be. I've had different difficulty relating to certain devotees in Detroit, but I've learned over the years that what good does it do to hold grudges? All it does is stops any constructive, even disagreement with such a devotee, and it brings you down. It keeps you stuck. In spiritual life, one of the things I've learned, like Lord Chaitanya's, mercy, 4 things he tells us to work on: to be humble, to be tolerant, to be prideless, and to be respectful. And those work. But when you get involved in disagreements, if you're not careful, you can become disrespectful very easy. You can become intolerant very easy. You can become very proud very easily. And you can become very, what's that 4th one? Pridelessness. It's about this. It's not the same as humility. It means to be aware of wanting to be thought of as a great person in your community or in your religion or in your nation. It's okay to do service in all those arenas, but we're not allowed to get a free pass card if we get all puffed up and think we're some kind of big leader. It don't work. Prabhupada, who could be a bigger leader than Prabhupada? He never took credit for anything personally. He always gave the credit to his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta. So I've learned, I understand a little bit more about that now than ever. And I'm a little bit lower on myself than ever. I'm a little bit more aware of how little I am than ever. and how good it feels to not be puffed up, try not to be puffed up, to be tolerant, to be, to understand, just the real stats, I say I can write 10 novels and become a famous writer. Is that going to make me happy necessarily? No. Can I get lost because of that?
Okay.
Yes.
We don't need to preach. Let's finish with the bio we've been going on. Eric is a preacher and saying you give class,
Okay.
you go on forever.
Okay.
Preaching, but let's finish with the bio.
Okay. So basically move forward. What happened? Well, a lot of things happened, but in about,
you're back involved in Detroit ISKCON and you start doing a devotional service. Obviously you're even though it's 30 years later, you're still a Prabhupada disciple, and that means a lot. You among ISKCON devotees, especially today, even in 2006, Prabhupada disciples are pretty rare, so they take you back and allow you to get back involved. Obviously, in 2011 or 12, when I was going there, you were given the Sunday classes.
Right.
I mean, Sri Nandana was the chairman of the board, but you were the senior devotee in the ashram.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I was asked to give classes, and I'm a natural for that because I was a teacher, and I still do that, and so I did that quite a bit. But when was it? 2011, about the same time you and I met, David. I wrote a letter to the board, and I expressed I couldn't understand why they were carrying on their activities the way they were. So we had strong disagreement, and
Disputes
I was basically
about temple management,
which
we'll avoid for this conversation. It's irrelevant to the bio and his spiritual transformation. It might have some relevance for how you got involved in interfaith, and to some extent,
about the same time
there wasn't a big interfaith is not. There's a lot of ISKCON disciples that do interfaith, but it's not necessarily what they do. And so, you chose the path when I met you, and I was active in rabbinic studies and promoting Judaism, and I like interfaith. And so, I wanted to include, larger perspective of Rabbi Dorit at the time, who, actually had the Bharati temple and Hindus and Muslims already, but, we had 10 different Christian denominations, and, there's multiple Jewish denominations. So we had multiple, so to say, Hindu denominations, even though you wouldn't self-identify as a Hindu. So, why don't you finish up by, so you end up back in Lansing promoting your temple, doing your service, and and you spent a few years as a regular in Rabbi Dorit's Interfaith, and I have probably maybe 10 times on my channel, Facebook, of events that I was at helping Rabbi Dorit in the Interfaith where you spoke. And now I'm not really involved with Rabbi Dorit even that much, but I think almost 5 years later, Antariksa is the one who's always telling me about Rabbi Dorit and DION. And then a few years ago, I don't know if it was less than a year ago or whatever, Antariksa told me he started Leon. And so if you want to give a little backdrop on that, and then we'll move to one of the main issues we wanted to cover that we're both involved in, which was cow protection, farming communities, vegetarianism, and then maybe we'll continue about interfaith.
Okay. Well, because of David's grace, I was introduced to Rabbi Dorit, and he's already mentioned the very first function that she had was at a nice Catholic church in the west part of the Detroit metro area. I forget the name of the church. Do you remember the name of the church, David? It's a nice Catholic church. I just can't pull it out right now. But
I think it was actually African-American Baptist. It might have been a former Catholic church that was taken over by Baptist. It was a few. We were in Catholic churches, and that one I didn't actually record. That was the one that was in the Detroit News, and that was actually Deva Madhavadas of the Harinam of Ypsilanti. At that, when he came into Detroit ISKCON, I remember the first time he came into Detroit ISKCON, and he was living in a church, and that was his first, real coming in, and he just became a devotee. And I'm not sure if I could take credit, but I think I was the very first person to put him in front of a crowd. It was like, interfaith, we need some devotees, and Antariksa Das was going to speak, And so Dave Amadavas came and led kirtan in the church with the harmonium, and we were very well received. And saying even
Ekanta came
it was a
along.
good event,
Myself,
very
Ekanta, him, and
friendly,
you. Yep.
and they even put us in the Detroit Jewish News, which probably precipitated that Antariksa Das became a regular popular speaker in Rabbi Dorit's DION.
Yeah, I've had some of the most favorite times that I've had preaching is just sharing as a Krishna devotee at the different events that DION would have over the years. And that's inspired me to want to do that here in my hometown of Lansing. When Jayatirtha sent us back here in 1980, I've stayed 40 years. I've been here 41 years now. I've been in the same house for 33 years. And so it's facilitated me working on these various projects, these various aspects of trying to serve Prabhupada. And I just have found interfaith is a really good mix or match for me, because I'm really attracted to Bhaktivinoda Thakur a lot. He talks about the sectarian spirit, which basically allows us not to communicate, even though we're in different groups. We start hating each other, fearing each other. And he says the greatest enemy of mankind. And so to me, applying that understanding from my great-great-grandfather, spiritual master, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, it allows me to practically apply that. I'm eternally grateful to you, David, for introducing me to Rabbi Dorit, because I have from her a promise. As soon as I want to have the first meeting of LION, the Lansing Interfaith Outreach Network, she will be here on board to talk to us about her experience with DION in Detroit. And by, you know this, David, 14 months ago, my mother passed away, April of 2020, right at the beginning of the COVID experience. And I made a commitment with my living sister and living brother that we would make it possible for our father to live out his days in the house he built for us 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And we're doing that. So when it comes Saturday, I travel to Indiana and stay there for 3.5 days in my dad's house, my house, my childhood house. And then I come back on Tuesdays, and thus I have made a commitment to do. And that's Krishna change. I die or my dad dies. That will continue to be my schedule. But what that's facilitated is doing. I'm working on starting what I call PEON. It's Pendleton Interfaith Outreach Network. Mostly it's just Christian churches. Not even a formal Jewish synagogue. There's not even a formal Catholic church right there in Pendleton, but there's all different. Even in my limited time back in Pendleton for 14 months, I know a lot of different people that are interested in people of different faiths, different walk, getting together and discussing things, at least. And that's what can happen with interfaith. Interfaith too, some devotees criticize interfaith as being watered down, and it can be. But if you do that, then you're not doing it right. Dave will attest that when I've spoken, I always try to mention the difference between the body and the self, and expand upon that a little bit, and then
I think at Temple Bethel, you pulled out your driver's license and it said 6 feet tall, blue eyes, and even had your gender, and then the essence, I'm not my body, which was really the main drive that made me interested in ISKCON, was the spiritual philosophy of that I've went on to study quite a bit. I don't have my ISKCON library, but now I've read over 500 books, pretty academic, from ISKCON literature and Vedic literature, and the complicated system of the interaction of the soul and the body, and what you said about speaking to prisoners, African Americans, people from all different backgrounds, and just associating like the Bhagavad Gita verse 6.9, that God is the source of energy behind everything, all people, whether we behave well or poorly, friend or foe, it is God that is the source of all people, and the essential entity that enlives people is in fact the soul. And because you gave that message in the interfaiths, it was very well received, because generally people are like, my tradition believes, and these various things, or let me sing this song. And even Judaism is very interesting, but what is this universal message that you could give to humanity? And ISKCON, say Hinduism or Vedic in general, or Krishna consciousness has relatively philosophically a very clear spiritual message to teach the world like that. That interfaith is. I've been doing debate and saying debate is part of the Vedic tradition as a method to get to the truth and find out what people believe, and kind of get to the bottom. What is the truth here? And so we got to debate it out. So it doesn't matter much. I usually try to have more structured conversations, but me and Antariska talk relatively frequently over the last few years, maybe not that much, once every month or so. But even when we do, it could be for hours, because we're both philosophical people, and the nature of conversation, like I did a Thursday night debate prep, and I was talking about this flowing exercise for how you take note, shorthand of debate to make sure the ideas are going. But ideas, is very natural for one thing to lead to another and forget what the topic is at hand. But for streaming, people listening, it's more important to for people like, what are these guys talking about? Why are we talking about this now? Even though there was a logic in the conversation. But I appreciate Antariska gave a pretty long bio. I'm sure even people, if there's anyone from ISKCON, Detroit ISKCON, Lansing, Farmington Hills ISKCON that's familiar with Antariska, maybe they never heard his full bio. And it's a long history that ISKCON, like Jai Tirtha, is no longer with us, and the rise and fall of personalities that maybe people never even heard of, like Elizabeth Ruther, in various important aspects of the history of Detroit ISKCON. When we talked, I wanted to talk about interfaith, and I thought Antariksha's bio was important to that. When I first met Antariksha, the big thing that he was promoting was Mishkap, Michigan Society for Cow Protection. As said, Antariksha, I talked with a lot of people, Nitya Krishna Das, his father Narendra Das, Sachi, about vegetarianism, but Antariksha, tens of hours. He just nailed me about the ethics and morality of meat eating, specifically the cow. And I intuitively agreed. Like, it was a certain point when and I didn't become initiated by chanting and interest in ISKCON. One of the main points that interested me was, interested me was this realization that it probably is wrong to kill the cow, and for food. And even though the Jewish tradition, we're not here to debate that, and I debated Antariksha and others tens of hours before they wore me down on vegetarianism. But within ISKCON, within Hinduism in general, Prabhupada's dictates. One of them was setting up farming communities, and one of the things Prabhupada did was debate people about meat eating and killing the cow. Prabhupada was always very careful to warn people of the moral dangers of killing the cow. And so Antariksha, now ironically, Deva Madhava Das, who talked, was at that first interfaith with Rabbi Dorit, and some of his associates went on to fulfill one of the things that Antariksha Das had wanted to do, which is create a farming community south of Ann Arbor, and has cows. Antariksha Das, when we first met, or shortly after, had purchased cows, had cows, because I was a civil engineer. I had a great interest in creating a farming community, more from like a construction engineering type of view. I wanted to be involved, and I did building permits and financial engineering for construction. So I wanted to be involved on that level. He had thought about a few times, tried to raise money, finding properties, and eventually the two cows, I think, that he had bought, eventually he had to give up, I think, to Sasha. Was it Sasha Farms?
Sasha Farm, yes.
Yeah. So
Manchester, Michigan.
And this was with the approval of Mother Malati and Irmela and senior devotees that even the people who disagreed with Antariksha about management or other issues, all agreed about the importance of cow protection, and the difficulty, like in Detroit, it's you can't even get a permit. Like it's almost illegal to own a cow and the property. And I wasn't even aware of it, but basically all cows are killed for their meat. Like if you have cheese or milk, the economics that generally cows could live tens of years, but could only industrially give milk for at most a few years. So generally, even if you have open range cows, or no matter how well they try to treat them in terms of not necessarily like industrial slaughter, all cows, all cheese and milk, generally those cows are killed by 3 years old, just because the economics, they can no longer provide enough milk, and the meat of the cow is worth more when they're younger. So even though they could live out natural life of tens of years, no matter how humane, how organic, the cow gets killed and slaughtered. And in India, that's a crime. It could even, according to Brahmanic law, killing a cow could even be punished by death. And we don't have to get into Indian politics, but just the morals of kind of like Judaism. There's certain mitzvahs, commands from God that really you have to say yes. If someone asks you, such like redeeming captives from prison, helping a person marry off their kids, various things, like the sages say you're basically required to say yes. And cow protection in Hinduism in general, and ISKCON Krishna consciousness, is generally one of those things where you're required to say yes. It's a command. It's important. It's a moral dictate of a Vaishnava, of a devotee of Krishna, to protect the cows. And Antariksa Das, working on it for 10 years, was able to protect 2 cows, was able to convince Duva to become a vegetarian and other people to become vegetarians. But yeah, I wanted to cover that issue because we talked quite a bit about the interfaith and the history, and we might get back to that if there's more interest. But yeah, one of the main things I want to talk about was now this bio has been given, cow protection. If you want to give like a backdrop, why it's important to the philosophy, why somebody who is interested in Krishna consciousness, the connection between that and cow protection and the Vedas, and then a practical level of someone like me who has been convinced and is a vegetarian, dealing in the state of Michigan, trying to protect cows. And I know I tried to help out in Detroit, in Farmington Hills, with devotees, and you can't get a cow if you're a member of ISKCON Farmington Hills and you want a cow. It's basically illegal. In Detroit, I looked into it, you got to get like a petting zoo permit. The only way to get a cow is to have like a petting zoo permit. So like Deva Madhavadas and the people out of Ypsilanti had to go an hour out of South Ann Arbor to a farming community and purchase land, which was what Antariska Das did. But then you're talking about a difficult economic venture if people in Metro Detroit that mostly work in the urban area are going to put together tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars to purchase a property and run hours away. And if you want, you could even go into the history of Prabhupada and kind of the failure of the farming community. Henry Doctorstian in New Vrindavan, and Kirtananda Swami's vision to some extent was, Kirtananda Swami was from the few or only people in America to fulfill that vision. Maybe there's Gita Nagri to actually creating a farming community, which is very difficult. And then if the people who are doing it now here in Metro Detroit, people that maybe discovered Hare Krishna in an urban area and then came to the philosophy, and then like now they're going to move to the farm, and so it's very interesting.
One time I asked, because a beautiful Swami, I'm blocking his name out, Varsana Swami. He's always lived in New Vrindavan. He's a wonderful, wonderful devotee, very elevated. He used to train horses and he drove bulldozers. He worked with Kirtanananda very closely to develop New Vrindavan into what it is now. And but like you mentioned, David, it's a basic part of Krishna consciousness. When Prabhupada left the planet, He gave a basic instruction to all of us disciples and followers. 2, grow your own food, number 1, and 2, keep cows. They go together, but you can do both of those things very nicely in farming communities. But we have not been very successful. We have farms around the North American continent, and there's farms around the world, of course, but nothing on the level that it could be or that probably needs to be. And I asked Varsana Swami one time, I said, what is it with us? Why is this so hard? And he said, that's a question I get all the time. He said, I created a new word to respond to that question. I said, okay, affluenza. Not influenza, affluenza. What he meant by that was that
I used to joke because I said I seen a lot of Indians come to America and devotees and move into mansions. Thank God. Joke called the blue-eyed man. It's only the blue-eyed man I ever saw buy a cow, and because it's difficult. A lot of people who deeply believe and are deeply disturbed by how cows are treated in America. Moving to an urban area. It's even you can't break the law or what you're going to do. Move hours away to a farming community. So it's quite a feat, and all the devotees that I know, Antariksa was the first guy, maybe earlier decades ago to actually buy a cow.
Well, myself and Adiraj Prabhu, Navadweep Prabhu, the late Bhakta Jim Prabhu, and his good wife George Ann, we got fired up and we created the Michigan Society for Cow Protection. And first project we got involved with was trying to buy a farm, and we looked at many farms, and we found this beautiful 80-acre farm out west of Ann Arbor, and we made a deal. We rented that farm with lease with option to buy for I think 600 and some, more than that, like approaching $1 million for this farm. But at the time, there was a lot of pressure to preserve farmland. And because of that, there were entities both at the federal government level, the state level, and at the local level where you could you could work with to get money to buy a farm, as long as that farm is going to be kept as a farm. And so we had agreements that there were going to be about $600,000 pumped into our purchase agreement to get an 80-acre farm over by Dexter, Michigan. But what happened during that period of time? Not a reset, but there was a housing crisis and a financial crisis, and the development pressure went away. That was one aspect of it. Plus, we were in over our heads. We were told start small, but we started with 80 acres, and it's very hard to make the payments. We did it. We kept it for a year. We actually got just shortly after we got that place, I was outvoted on the board at the time to buy 2 oxen, and so I went with Adi Raj. We rented a construction van. He found a breeder down in North Carolina that only bred gear cows from India. And I was lucky to raise some funds to buy Bhima and Dharma. And we actually drove to North Carolina and purchased 2 3-month-old brothers, who became Bhima and Dharma. And Bhima is still alive. In fact, I want to stand up here, show your audience. See this? This is Bhima. This is a picture of Bhima on a T-shirt that a congregation member here in Lansing gave me. I inspired them to go down to Shasha and meet this critter, which they did. And a lot of activists come through the Shasha farm, and everybody loves Bhima there. They've taken so good care of him. Originally, both Bhima and Dharma went there in the fall of the summer of 2013. I had them both. I was taking care of them personally because our board had fallen apart. And so we had these 2 beautiful animals to take care of, and other board members were doing other things. And so I got permission from
No, I apologize. I'm muted. So are you there, Antariksha Das?
Yeah,
So,
but my computer went dark. I
okay.
don't. What should I click here? Let me click on this. That should do it. I still don't.
It might just be because your computer automatically shuts down if you don't touch anything after a bit. So you just didn't touch anything. It went. But yeah, it seems all right. So I'm doing a screen share right now of Sasha Animal Farm on Facebook. I'll put
Yeah, there's Bima
the link.
himself.
I'll put the link in the chat. And so this is not Hindu or ISKCON affiliated. It's just a humanitarian
Yes.
animal protection institute in Michigan that was when it became too expensive or infeasible to. Is that Bima there?
No, that's Bima right there.
Say it again.
Bima is the brown animal. Well, the baby.
Yeah. So this was the cow that Antariksa had originally purchased and tried to create a farming community around, but it became too expensive or infeasible. And Sasha Farm, as a humanitarian animal protection institute, not as like devotional or Krishna consciousness, took the cow and as you can see, this is 2 days ago. This picture is from 2 days ago. As I said, cows could live up.
Good. I know he's alive.
Cows could live up to 40 years. So, most cows are killed after almost all cows, almost never is a cow in industrial milk or definitely meat, but even for milk or cheese ever lived past 3 years. How old is Bima now?
Well, we got him in 2009. So he's going on 13.
Yeah. So, thank God for Sasha Farm. And so what's the name of the farming community of the Ypsilanti devotees?
Goloka Premadam.
Okay, so you could
maybe Michigan. They have 10 acres there.
Goloka Premadam. Okay, so you could go and continue, and I will show in the background what eventually the devotees of Michigan, separate from Antariksa. I mean, they're friendly with Antariksa, but these are other devotees who in some way accomplished what Antariksha wasn't able to. And these pictures are, I guess, are old. This is already October 2020. I have not been able to make it out there. Is that
from Goloka Premadam?
Yeah, this is here in Michigan, in maybe Michigan, which is a little bit closer to the Ohio border. And I don't know if Siddharth, who had debated on Modern Day Debates, people might know my channel.
He's involved, yeah.
It even lived out there and was part of the devotees. But here you could see,
is this live shot?
This is just their Facebook page. So I'm just showing. Okay. I showed Bima, which Antariksha Das had to give up to Sasha Farm, which you could see he's taking good care and Bima's in good shape, but was turned over to humanitarian animal welfare people, as opposed to Goloka Premadam, which is being ran by devotees in the way that Prabhupada would be happy with Sasha Farms and what they're doing, but it wasn't what Prabhupada was in favor of cow protection in any manner that a person did it, but it wasn't what he wanted. It wasn't what Antariksha didn't just want to get cows into Sasha Farm. He wanted to fulfill the Sanatana Dharma and recreate these farming communities, which there's been some success. So you could go on, and here's a drone video of Goloka Premadam, and I encourage people to like the Facebook page and try to get in contact and visit them. So back to you.
So what happened? I tried to buy a farm, and that's where Bima had a brother named Dharma. Like I mentioned, we got two oxen, two young bulls. And they weren't oxen yet. Oxen is a bull that's been neutered. People don't know. Anyways, I ended up having both Bima and Dharma at a farm that my friend Harold Henry owned, a 152-acre farm. And I kept him there with Harold's permission for almost 13 months, through a winter even, and through a drought even. And but what happened was I had 4 backers too, 2 doctors and 2 high officials in the Social Security Administration of the United States of America in Chicago. They were very into helping me buy Harold's farm. And what happened was Harold was in an area where the Ku Klux Klan still probably operates somewhat, not like it was, but Howell, Michigan is famous as a center for the Ku Klux Klan in mid-Michigan. And so Harold, being Harold, 90 some years old, 80 in his 80s at the time, he told me one time, he said he was a little bit uptight about people coming by his farm and seeing people with brown skin out there working. I go, Harold, come on, but it didn't matter. It wasn't meant to be. And so he sold the farm to a pizza mogul from downriver Detroit. Make a long story short, when Harold decided not to sell the farm to us.
If you could click to turn your camera back on, it might be on the bottom. If you have a stop camera, if you click, your camera's not on anymore.
Yeah.
And maybe at the bottom, if there's an X, there's mute, and then
there it is. That should do it.
Okay, yeah, it's working again now.
I don't know what did that. Maybe I did it accidentally.
Okay.
Anyways, I met Dorothy and Monty. They're the owners of Shasha Farm, and I had them come down to Harold's farm. And Harold had 10 cows at the time that I was also taking care of with him. And I wanted to save all of them. And what happened, matter of fact, was the board voted to spend some money. And not only did we give Bhima and Dharma to Shasha Farm, but they took 4 of Harold's cows. They had to buy them from Harold. Harold wouldn't give them up. They had to pay Harold for them. But there were a mother and 2 children, along with Bhima and Dharma, that went to Shasha Farm at the same time. Dharma didn't make it through the first winter. He was pure gear, and so that's probably why. Whereas Bhima, his mother was Indo-Brazilian, so he wasn't pure, and it's probably harder for Dharma to make it through the cold Michigan winter. And he expired. He passed away in January of 2014. Interesting thing, though, one of the cows that we saved, I called her Mother Satyabhama. They changed her name to Apple, but that's okay. Apple was actually pregnant. We didn't know it. And so a couple weeks after Dharma passed away, Satyabhama Apple gave birth to a new cow. And those animals are still there, as far as I know, and I'm not sure if they're all alive, but they were part of the deal. And so even though Dharma left, one of the cows we saved was a pregnant cow, and she gave birth after Dharma left. But anyways, they're still there, and I want to praise Monte and Dorothy. They have done so much to take care of Bhima. Bhima's horns. Harold called Bhima Downy because his horns called him uppy, but before they went up, they went down right close to his skull, and his head, they would get infections underneath his horns. Monty and Shasha Farm. Monty went to Michigan State University, Ohio State University, and Princeton, the recognized 3 top vet schools in the world, practically in this country. And they all said the same thing. If you're going to help Bhima not suffer so much, you got to do a major operation, have his horns removed. And that happened. And it happened at Michigan State University. It's a 4-hour surgery. It's in the annals. But they financed the whole thing. They made it happen. And Bhima is now a hornless oxen. But he doesn't have any infection anymore in his head to bother him. And so, plus they've taken just beautiful care of him. They love him so much, but they have spent thousands of dollars taking care of him, so beautifully. And I stood up here. Here's I got this T-shirt from Shasha Farm. I guess where's it at? There it is, Shasha Farm, and this is Bhima on the front because he's He's one of the most beloved, if arguably the most beloved animal over there. He's just so lovable, and it's such good PR for gear cows. And that Monty and Dorothy are beautiful souls and they're very expert in their nonprofit. They have 80-acre farm. They own the land, but the nonprofit is a separate entity, of course, and they just do beautiful work. But like David pointed out, that's not what I'm interested in. I love it. I love going there. I love seeing all the other animals.
Just to mention, I want you to continue. I added my friend Jennifer, calls herself Church of Entropy, who I've been streaming with for 2 years, back and forth between Canada and New Zealand. And she's also, Vedic, leaning more from, I guess what you call the Arya Samaj than ISKCON. And I believe although, she doesn't like to give out too much personal information because of the dangers of YouTube, is also involved in some sort of parallel creating a farming community also. But you continue, and hopefully she'll join the conversation in a bit.
Okay, well, because I know time is flying by, let me segue to the fact that, the nonprofit is still alive. We had, like I mentioned before, we had trouble on the board, and this happened, that happened, and I had to do quite a bit of work to get the tax status reinstated, but it's all completely flush. You have to make if your annual income is below $50,000, all you have to do is file a what's called an electronic postcard, basically, with the federal government. And with the state government, you pay a $20 fee every year.
Which is actually kind of why I wanted to get involved. I said, I was in University of Michigan construction management. I did building permits.
Well, yeah, it's still there.
And even before, I wasn't sure how much I wanted to be involved in, being a devotee or a vegetarian. I still wanted to build Hindu temples and help create farming communities. I am leaning towards a devotee and been vegetarian many years now. So for years, me and Antariksa would talk about fundraising and the bureaucracy and how to get around these legal loopholes that are pretty boring. Not too many people really care about these things, but that's professionally and what I had worked in and went to school for. And so you got a guy like Antariksa or even ISKCON in general, who you might not have people with training that hit this brick wall of regulation. Even when fundraising is not the issue, fundraising is very difficult in and of itself. But then, the regulation could be a brick wall, even if you have the funds. Initially,
when we set up Mishkop, Mother Malati used Lord Chaitanya's philosophy to understand the relationship between Mishkop and ISKCON, which was a Chincha Beta Beta. We're different, but we're the same. And so that's good, because this nonprofits actually belong to the people of the state they're in. So the people of the state of Michigan have a nonprofit dedicated to cow protection. That would be Michigan Society for Cow Protection. And our DBA is Mishkop. And by Krishna's grace and my own not giving up, I have kept that alive. And I'm ready to find people that are interested in using it in whatever reasonable way. Like David says, there's always problems, but quite frankly, the real problem is people's consciousness. That's the challenge. Or what is an animal? Why in the hell do we want to protect cows? Or why do people have such strong feelings for cats and dogs? And why is there so much growing sentiment?
I was sympathetic as being kosher, and I argued like you guys are going further than needed. It's like, okay, we use kosher slaughter and don't have milk and meat together. But eventually was won over to full vegetarianism and thinking generally it's wrong to kill the cow. But even from kosher, there is quite a sizable population. A lot of my involvement with ISKCON has been with the larger yoga and vegetarian community, and a lot of great devotees like Prafula, who actually helped create the Michigan Vegetarian conference, and I know hundreds of probably the major people in Metro Detroit that are involved in yoga and vegetarianism, and ISKCON is definitely one of the pillars in the vegetarianism farming community, and there's a certain sizable 2-3% of the population that are vegetarianism. But yeah, I was saying that it's like talking to a brick wall trying to convince someone that vegetarian, a moral ethical reason. Like most vegetarianisms in America lean more towards health benefits or ecological reasons, and you want to tell somebody it's morally wrong to kill the cow, they're going to laugh you out of the room. Even like University of Michigan, they try to meet like, oh, that's your religion, that's your belief system. We'll try to accommodate. But if you actually wanted to put forward a moral argument, and Jennifer here, John Frances Garepi, who we've both talked to and debated, I debated him on vegetarianism.
Who is this?
Just a streamer in Montreal that's
okay,
pretty popular, likes doing debate, capitalist, some leaning towards ethno-nationalism.
He has a novel theory about evolution and a book.
He has a PhD in biology.
Interesting.
And his own theory on viruses called revolutionary phenotype. But he likes debate in general. So I challenged him to a debate, like on a neutral topic on vegetarian. I think I beat him that debate. Even he admitted
that. What do you think, Jennifer? Did he?
I debated him multiple times, and I mean, I didn't make him a vegetarianism, but just in terms of laying out the facts of the benefits of vegetarianism, even he largely admitted that all the points I made were true. The ecological and health reasons, he basically conceded all of those points as true, and kind of was like, well, still I'm going to eat meat, as opposed to I argued with him about multiculturalism. He didn't concede any of those points. I argued with other evolution, and he didn't concede any of those points. But in terms of vegetarianism, this guy with a PhD in biology largely agreed with my, the evidence I presented on ecological and health benefits. And really the only thing he could come up with was like the B12 and, right. certain arguments. But the facts are overwhelming that vegetarianism, like in Germany, they've outlawed beef eating, not because of ethical, moral reasons, but because of environmental, ecological reasons. But I became vegetarian more off of the ethical, moral reasons. I thought that maybe it was really harming the Western society was the mass slaughter
how did this person
of cows. But it's the type thing, like on a street, it's very difficult to because people like, do you care about the environment? Most people would say yes, but and most people, they don't want to harm animals, but convincing people to become vegetarian is very difficult. Although even on modern day debate, vegetarianism is one of the popular debates. So if you're in university, and I would say like probably one of the top 10, low 10 topics that people would debate on is still vegetarianism, but most people present ecological and health reasons as opposed to a Vedic perspective where it's more moral.
Well, that's the challenge, and my vision for the Michigan Society for Cow Protection is not just to follow Prabhupada's instructions to try to help create farming communities where you can practice cow protection, practice growing your own food, but to get involved with organizations that exist like PETA. What's PETA's understanding of what an animal is? What's the Humane Society's understanding of what an animal is? What is this emotion involved? Where does it come from? And the Bhagavad Gita is so clear that, a cow is no different than me spiritually. A dog is no different than me spiritually. So we can exchange emotions. But if you, like this person you debated, what's his understanding of what a living being is? Did he go into that at all?
He's a nihilist. So I mean, he believes that there's only a material realm, and that there is no such thing as souls, and that morals are just preferences. So that to argue that it's morally wrong to kill the cow, he's a nihilist and doesn't even believe in morality. But he did concede scientifically that I was right about the ecological and the majority of the health reasons that I presented. So it was a win for me. I consider it a win because him as I'm just a undergraduate U of M civil engineer. This man had a PhD in biology, and he largely conceded that I was right about the ecological and health reasons. So in that, I considered it a win.
It's not about whether the animal's alive that usually the debate ends up turning on, is whether the animal is conscious. Because I think there's a pretty clear line of reasoning of shared root to consciousness. Therefore, all living beings have the capacity to suffer. And therefore, if we care about that kind of thing, We have to take a more or less holistic view to understand that it's not just humans that suffer. And there are some people, I don't know if Jeff's one of them, that would actually take the position that animals are not conscious. Therefore, the suffering of animals is not on the radar. So I'd say, I don't know what Duvit thinks, but in terms of the debates we've had, this is the most common maybe pushback.
One of the things I can share, one of the things that Prabhupada talks about when he's trying to help people understand the similarity between, for instance, a human living being and because we are animals too, you know. I mean, most people won't argue that. And Prabhupada says, well, what do? It's four things we can be seen to be doing all the time. We sleep, we eat, we mate, and we defend ourselves. And he would make the point, if you look at animal societies, they sleep, they eat, they mate, and they defend in some fashion. And so then Prabhupada would say, well, what's the difference then? And Prabhupada says, you know, the Vedic literatures say that consciousness is a symptom of life. And you might think a tree has no consciousness, but there's there are experiments some scientists have done. Some people wouldn't call them scientists, I guess, that show that trees have consciousness even. So I don't know, if you don't, people that are nihilist, I mean, that's like, okay, well, why is there any basis for any morality then? What's the basis?
I think he would consider morality to be a subjective, personal, aesthetic preference. I don't want to say I'm speaking for him, but if I had to hazard a guess, he would say it was entirely a subjective thing.
Totally humanist, huh? I mean, in a sense.
Yeah, I went too off topic, but I got
sure.
Ricardo here, who is an anonymous streamer who. Oh, okay. No, unfortunately, it's a troll. So,
okay.
But he's the one who set me up and, you know, kind of debated. And he's a meat eater, and was kind of like in the camp of ethno-nationalism. But he set me up for you know, those debates, and unfortunately, they're even making bad comments in the chat about largely about your transsexualism. But we could avoid that topic.
I'll take him on.
Okay, it was a troll. Like he didn't actually. If it was him and he actually wanted to have that discussion, I'm sure you're familiar. But no, it was just a troll, which is the nature of streaming, which is why Jennifer doesn't even like telling people where she lives, because it could be dangerous to put yourself out there. And, you know, the Hare Krishnas take a lot of courage taking the debate to the street corner and, you know, saying vegetarianism is a pretty easy debate to win. There's a lot of evidence, you know, for even if the person, if the person takes a moral suffering, animals have souls, but even if the person's like, animals don't have souls and their suffering doesn't matter, there's still substantial lines of evidence. But you know, the nature of the material realm is that it's hard to get a person to stop and think about what they're doing. And so the reason that people can't really stop and think about vegetarianism, I mentioned this to Antariksa Das, that in my local synagogue, which actually Antariksa came to once, and participated in the prayer service.
I still have my yarmulke.
Yeah, and he was actually able to, you know, do the ritual and, you know, follow, like, stand and do the prayers because of you know, largely disciplined religious background. But the only person that really took the debates about vegetarianism seriously as I was becoming vegetarian was the butcher. And because the butcher had thought deeply about the morals and ethics of meat eating and was happy to debate with me the justification for meat eating, but he was the only person who took the debate seriously. And actually, you know, my mother's maiden name was Glat from the Ukraine, and very likely that was kind of like a caste name, like Glat kosher is a type of meat slaughter where they test to make sure kosher, you're not supposed to eat an animal that has any like ulcers or holes in the esophageal tract. So glat means that you, after the animal is slaughtered, like a tire, they put the esophageal tract in water to see if it bubbles up, and if it's and if it does, then it means that the animal is not considered kosher, and that's called glat kosher. So likely for probably hundreds of years. If my great-grandfather name was Glatt in the Ukraine, that probably means for hundreds of years that at least from that side of my family ancestry, we were butchers. So it was an issue, and I was familiar with the ethics. Like I wasn't someone who never thought about it. I had just thought that kosher was sufficiently moral, and that's why I was willing to have the conversations with the devotees, because it was an issue. I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure kosher and it was ethically, morally justified. And Antariksa nailed me down, and I tell my dream that I think it was a dream that pushed me forward. I had the arguments, and I had this dream where I was eating a hamburger, and it came to life, and I don't know, it grew arms. I recall the graphics of the dream. And then I like wrestled it and choked it down until, like, I, God forbid, like in the dream, I choked the hamburger to death. And then in the last second, the hamburger told me, like, you might have beat me now, but I'll be back. And so it was this kind of like godly message, a dream that I had that pushed me over the end of becoming vegetarian. Also, like health reasons, I noticed that, like, I used to throw up and get sick substantially more frequently. I wasn't necessarily a sickly person, but I would get throw up like once a month or something, and I get sick every once in a while. And so since I became vegetarian, I almost never throw up, and the amount of times a year I get sick had vastly decreased. But even with the moral and ethical, where I was being kind of worn down to admitting that, yeah, it's probably good to be vegetarian, period, it was actually this visceral dream of wrestling the hamburger, and then the hamburger telling me, like, I'll be back, that was the final element that led me to become vegetarian.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. It's really hard for people to see past the, well, it tastes good and it's part of my diet and it's easy to cook. And it's like, I can see just in some of these people that their aggression and frustration is exacerbated by the meat eating, but I don't think that they can.
That's also one of the things I saw, like conflict. I mean, I was generally avoid conflict, but Judaism's a somewhat conflict religion, like Israel, Palestine, and anti-Semites are various things. But I saw as I became vegetarian that I lost my aggressive energy. I started avoiding conflict much more successfully.
How long have you been a vegetarian, Antariksa?
Since I was 26.
And even when you went back, just because he gave his bio earlier.
I'm 71 now.
You said the 18 years where you left devotional service, you still
you were a vegetarian. 18 years when I left devotional service, I ate whitefish 2 or 3 times. And I'll tell you a real quick pastime. One time, I went to a restaurant with my
friend. For the audience who wasn't tuning in earlier, Antariksha's bio, there's a Prabhupada disciple in the 70s, and then spent 18 years where he left being Krishna consciousness, but still at that point, he didn't become a meat eater, and he only ate whitefish 2 or 3 times.
And one time, I was out to eat with my friend Billy. He had his son we called Tree, and my son Prema. And I ordered some bacon. I don't even remember if I ate it or not. I don't think I did. Maybe I did. That was the only time. And this is a joke. I offered to my son Prema, he's still a full vegetarian, never eaten meat in his life. I offered him some, and he put his arm up like this and bit his own arm, just to show me, what are you doing, Dad? So I've often wondered how my son gets along so well with meat eaters. I mean, you just learn to do it. You just love them. And
Bhagavita 6:9, you get along with everybody. If you could get along with former murderers in prison, why can't you get along with the meat eater? So you don't have to push them every time. Like, I do the dishes for my parents. They still eat meat, and I go to their house and I clean up after their meat, and I don't bother them about it. And they even forget that I'm, like, almost 10 years I've been vegetarian, and my parents still forget. They'll ask me if I want to eat something. I'm like, don't remember I'm vegetarian. But like, no, you don't have to have conflict with people just because you disagree. And I wouldn't take in my house, like I a tenant or people, that's a hard, fast rule. Like I said, for living in my house, like vegetarianism, even egg, I was like, do not bring egg into my house.
Yep.
Like zero chance. But besides, I don't have conflict with meat eaters like that.
Yeah. My my family are all meat eaters, and I actually, my little sister she just retired after 40 years as a teacher at Noblesville, Indiana, and she's a good-hearted Christian and does a lot of volunteer work, blah blah blah. But I gave her a book by William Scully, who was a speechwriter for, you might probably know this, both of you. He's a speechwriter for 43 for W. Bush. He wrote a book called Dominion. It's a 600-page book, a meditation on the word dominion in the Bible. And he's a Christian. He comes down the side of, what in the hell are we doing here? Basically, we have no right to, just because God gives us dominion to treat animals like just nothing and just for our tongues. And it's a powerful, but she wouldn't read it because of what we've been talking about. People are, like you said, Jennifer, people just get comfortable and they believe there's no moral problem with it. Christian is not defiled by anything that comes into the mouth or what comes out, that kind of half truth. And it just there. So I just, but still I do my duty. I'll tell a real quick funny joke. I was at an MNA conference, Michigan Nonprofit Association. We were in a breakout session, and the topic was, in the breakout session, how do you tell your story of your nonprofit to the Michigan citizens at large to attract them? And it was being conducted by former James Blanchard, the former governor of the state. I forget her name, but she's really good. She goes, well, research has shown that you start advocating for animals beyond the size of dogs, it's really tough. And so I raised my hand up and I said, I'm Eric Crosley, and I'm with the Michigan Society for Cow Protection. Everybody burst out laughing. And she did a great segue. She goes, oh, well, she goes, up in Obed-Elsie, this big milk area up there, they have fundraisers doing basically cow patch bingo. They put numbers on cows, and they put the grid on the pasture, and whoever poops on what number, that's how the game is played, So it was, I think humor is very, very important when it comes to try to educate people. I have a stand-up. It's a fake stand-up. I go, okay, for 1 year, folks, nobody can eat any traditional farmed animals. You can't eat a cow, you can't eat a pig, you can't eat a chicken, you can't eat a fish, none of that. For only 1 year, everybody has to eat, if you have to eat meat, you just have to eat dog and cow meat. Now, we're not going to say your own dog and cow. No, heaven forbid. No, I mean your own dog and cat or whatever, your hamster. But for 1 year, and we'll just rate, and try to make the point that people, if they don't want to get it, they won't get it. They just won't, but you got to try, some extent. And I'm interested in on the point of helping people understand, well, what is an animal? I have this whole idea for a book called The Animal. And the whole point of the book would be to carry on with the conversations that are there about why in the hell should we be vegetarian? What based upon some understanding of what the soul is, and I find that, like my father right now, he's missing his lover of 76 years. And he doesn't.
This is an ISKCON book I bought. I think I even bought this at Detroit ISKCON. I'm not sure if you're familiar. Cows Are Cool, Love Them by Dr. Sahad. Yeah.
This guy's great. He is a wonderful devotee, Yeah. I correspond with him. He's a good poet too. That's, he writes really nice poetry. It's a beautiful book. Yeah. These are stories. He probably does more to spread knowledge about love for animals than anybody. It's just, these stories are powerful and they're beautiful.
How long did it take you to transition to vegetarian?
Not very long. I was already very poor. I was living with 3 other people in Bloomington, Indiana. I was living as Erica. I was still working for the university, but I got into Gita, and I was ready, I was ready, and it didn't take long. But I have a play. It's called The House of Five Lights. And the 3 people I was living with at 500 South Madison, Bloomington, Indiana, they're all iconic people. The living room had a chandelier came down. There's 5 lights, and it's just a short play. It was based upon my experience transitioning out of living as Erica in Bloomington, Indiana, as a meat eater, as a modern dancer, as a poet, all these things. I didn't know how to handle it. So I just cut off every relationship, sold everything I had, got it all down to cash, cut my hair, changed my name legally from Erica back to Eric, and got a Greyhound bus ticket, sold my, step van and cut off every relationship. I had a relationship with Body and Narayan Swami. And on July, I left it all behind and moved in. I had no idea what it would be like. It blew my mind. What is this? All these different practices. My service for the first 3 months was doing laundry for the other devotees and cooking and going out and trying to sell Prabhupada's books, but I stuck with it.
Wonderful. That sounds like a very wonderful story. David says you already did give a bio, so I apologize if I'm asking you.
Here's a funny take. Now,
I think we lost.
I think we lost you again,
unfortunately.
and it's probably because every like 10 or 15 minutes, if he doesn't touch something on his computer. So if you're back on Antariksa, I think you got to make sure to touch something so your screen share doesn't. And are you there, Antariska? So we can't hear him yet. He might have to unmute. It might have muted in your mic. So just at the bottom of the screen. And I guess Ricardo paid $10 to get his message. Blessing equating meat eaters with felons is misanthropic. Humans, particularly northern peoples, need meat in their diets. This seems to be the tip of the iceberg of the guest's anti-sociability. Need meat in their diets. This seems to be the tip of the iceberg of the guest's now we're getting echo from you. That's Jennifer, the echo. So, okay, this guy, Ricardo, even paid me $10, which half will go to YouTube to put his message there. I'll put it on the screen. And I know Nitya Krishna Das had that with his son, where his son.
Well, who's doing that? He's
an anonymous person that protects his identity because he has he's not part of the clan, but a blue-eyed man who has ethno-nationalist leanings and says things that would be considered racist. So therefore,
he thinks I'm racist.
Well, he would be accused of being racist. Therefore, he doesn't show his identity. But I mean, me and Antariksa are familiar with a local devotee, Nitya Krishna Das, who gives classes online. And I think his son, in the public school, had spoken up in front of assembly about the moral wrong of eating meat. And I think they said the principal consider that an attack on our culture. So this Indian kid, so that trying to inform people that eating meat is wrong, was attacked from the school that he was in as attacking their culture. But I mean, and Prabhupada used to say, biblically, "Thou shalt not kill" applies to the cow, and so that's a normal pushback that you would get. That you're that if you're putting it from a Hindu perspective. It could be that killing the cow is basically just as bad, or even some schools worse, than killing a human. And to your average Westerner, just this concept that a person could be held morally accountable for killing the cow is almost absurd. And I mentioned, that my ancestors, at least one line of my grandmother's mother's father, were probably butchers for hundreds of years. And so, people vegetarian, like, are you saying that my ancestors were bad people? You're saying killing the cow is wrong and punishable. So it's a direct attack on, like Antariksa, his father, my parents, my ancestors in Europe in general for hundreds, thousands of years that were meat eaters, that a line of questioning that eating meat is morally wrong appears to be a direct attack on, so to say, me and my ancestors. You say killing the cow is wrong. That means you're attacking and saying that my ancestors are bad people.
I still don't understand who this guy is, but that's okay.
I mean, he's not gonna tell you. I know who he is, and it's saying, but I've spoken with him, saying he's a guy who has somewhat strong opinions and doesn't like to use his real name on YouTube due to he gives himself a name, but it's a common thing in streaming that people will use anonymous name. So he's, you could just talk
out
with
of fear, I suppose.
but he's a fellow blue-eyed man like you. He's a blue-eyed man that just uses a colored man's avatar to express his point, and the reason why he hides his identity is because what he feels like sticking up for his fellow blue-eyed men will be called racist in a certain way. But I mean, it's largely, say, from the blue-eyed man. And even David Duke, this channel I was on, I was talking where I debated vegetarianism. This man had spoken with David Duke, and you mentioned the Klan, and said, David Duke specifically talked about the tradition of blue-eyed men eating meat and being an important part of European culture. And it could be anybody, like as a Jew, consider like, eating meat is wrong. But to some extent, the blue-eyed man, the European culture that has a long tradition of meat eating, that to say you're preaching vegetarianism is a direct attack and affront to European people and European tradition. And obviously, Antariksa is, I think you're almost all German genetically, and
Irish and German.
Irish and German,
Yeah.
which also Jennifer's, Irish and German bloodline, and this guy Ricardo is also probably Irish and German, Anglo blood-wise. But I mean, do you see any validity to saying that you're attacking your own ancestors by promoting vegetarianism because you're saying
I
that
don't
the
see
path
it like that at
you're
all.
saying that the path of your ancestors were wrong and that they were morally reprehensible people for thousands of years slaughtering the cow?
Culture, it's cultural, it's cultural activity. But to say that because I change my way I look at it's my understanding of an animal. If somebody doesn't have an understanding of an animal, as if they believe, that the animal was put there by God to be slaughtered and to be utilized in human diet, then that's a different thing than how to put it.
Well, just your dad. Is your dad going to be punished for eating the cow? Even though he's your dad and you love him and generally he's a good guy and he's the reason you're here, is eating the cow just factually murder and your dad is guilty of murder? I'm sorry.
I think no. If there are laws of material nature, there are laws of material nature. Prabhupada often gave the example that if a little baby accidentally, God forbid, puts their hand in a fire, they're not going to be excused because they're an ignorant, innocent child. So, but that doesn't mean that God is some kind of person that takes pleasure in seeing the soul suffer the results of ignorance when it comes to the laws of material nature. So you have to have context. People that argue, like this person here that's arguing that I'm a misanthropist somehow because I'm arguing for educating, discussing what a soul is, what an animal is.
There's a lot of trolls in the chat, and they're just trying to rile you up, really.
Okay.
So I don't think they have an argument. I think they're stuck.
That is the argument
prideful.
that you are directly attacking my ancestor. And Eric himself, who is genetically very similar to this man who asked the question, and Jennifer, you're looking at your own father and saying, is your father a murderer or not? Is it factually your father might be a good man, might be ignorant, but is killing the cow factually murder? And your father, no matter how much you love him, and your ancestors over 1,000 years of history, factually murderers, God forbid. And I mean, so it is a reasonable question. And I think that is the strongest. You're going to tell me that killing the cow is wrong. You're attacking 1,000 years of my family history.
He's not saying that. I guess he.
Well, he called it misanthropic, but I mean, I'm putting the argument
antisocial too.
Well, it's not. I mean, he's saying that you're antisocial by attacking the ways of the West. Even if you say like you're a traitor to the blue-eyed men by being, like in a certain way, you're breaking the way of your ancestors. Weren't you come from a farming community? Didn't thousands of years of your ancestors slaughter cows?
I would say so, yeah.
So I mean, how do you take them?
I'm thankful
to give the most. I mean, we are talking cow protection, and I'm a vegetarian, largely agreeing with you. And I brought on Claire Khaw, actually from London, who promotes a version she calls secular Quranism, but I'm sure she's familiar. I mean, she constantly is accusing me of being an idol worshiper and thinks I'm going to go to hell and maybe be executed one day by the Jews for being an idol worshiper. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about cow protection. You're the one who convinced me to be a vegetarian. So let's have it straight out. Antariksha, like being a man who comes from a similar bloodline from the West, how are you not attacking thousands of years of history of the West? How are you not claiming that if killing the cow is morally wrong, how is it not possible that that thousands that all the people who've killed the cow are morally reprehensible and accountable for it?
To wake up to a different way to look at an issue is not the same as the person that's making the argument that what it's really going on. I'm attacking my own ancestors for being murderers. That's one way to look at it, but that's not all that's going on at all. I mean, Krishna says, God says that if, God's a merciful God and compassionate God. And, it's not like one thing, you're guilty of one, you might be guilty of 10 things. It's a question of mercy. I mean, God's merciful.
Well, he doesn't forgive everything, though, does he, Eric?
This is Claire Paul from London, who not only thinks you're wrong about vegetarianism, thinks you're going to hell for worshiping idols, God forbid.
Well, here, I'll tell you a story about idols. I have a very dear friend. I offered him some prasadam once, which is food offered to God, and then it becomes, spiritualized. We call it mercy, prasadam. And we offer it to the deity, not to the idol, to the deity. My friend, he just in a certain mood, he said, I don't eat food that's offered to idols. I said, I don't either, Billy. And that was it. No more discussion.
I don't know if I've missed it earlier, but what made you reject the religion of your ancestors?
I didn't reject the religion of my ancestors. I just, went into the inside of it.
Well, that's the transformation.
Jesus Christ taught how to love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind. All the other stuff's bullshit. There you go.
We got spiritual mamzer. These people are coming out. These guys never. And Antariksha Das is my friend in real life. I've spoken with them tens of hours. It's probably not really him. And now, Brundle wants to attack you for transsexualism. And Eric can handle himself. He ran for Congress. He's a street preacher. Eric hates his own genitalia. Why would she care about
I am not genitalia. I'm not this body. I'm a spirit soul. This body's a temporary car that I'm driving, okay?
But okay.
He even paid $5 to attack you like that. Not only this guy wanted to attack you about that, he even paid to do it.
That's okay.
Perhaps he's eating too much meat and he's got some anger problems.
Yeah,
he's a professional. That's how he chooses to use his money. But Antariksha became transsexual before becoming a devotee of Krishna, and largely becoming a devotee of Krishna actually stopped him from completing the process. So that's more a question of his youth, although he's happy to discuss it and defend it in general. But yeah, I mean, if you want, if you want, I would host a debate, and if Antariksha wanted, I would host a debate on, or someone else. But no, I mean, we're talking cow protection, and if Claire, Islamic or a certain perspective to look at it and say, I mean, did you want to say something, Jennifer or Claire, on the vegetarianism or the ancestors? What does it mean if what does it mean if I became Hindu and that 1,000 years of my ancestors were butchers? Does that mean like oh crap, like they're in hell? Like I'm sorry, like I thought like my ancestors were good people, but they were guilty of this egregious sin and related to the idol worship. So you would frame it, like, okay, he didn't leave Christianity, he got to the heart of Christianity, because that's kind of a Hindu Vedic conception of non-sectarianism, where you didn't reject and leave Christianity, you got to the essence of it. But obviously in the West, no one really buys that argument that you fulfilled Christianity. They think you rejected it, and God forbid, like you saw, like the Klan and Howl, you're a traitor to your people even for doing it.
Well, here's what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I talked about this in real life. I'm saying, like, me
Here's
and
real
Antariksha
life.
have went to events and do interfaith. Antariksha dealt with the Klan, and he people like he comes from a small town in Indiana that doesn't even have any Jews. That he's familiar with people that think he's a traitor to his people.
I take my father to the same church I was baptized in, and I have open emails to the ministers of the First United Methodist Church. And, like, we agree to disagree. And I wear a cartoon over my head. This person thinks it's okay to believe in Jesus and Krishna simultaneously. And it is. I'm living proof. You cannot accept it. That's okay. But
this
there's
guy doesn't have enough money to pay to be heard. But another man definitely thinks that vegetarianism is part of an anti-white European agenda. And another green-eyed man, probably Germanic blood, but feels that the vegetarian agenda is intrinsically a weapon against the blue-eyed man.
Well, it's very complicated because some populations have no history of vegetarianism for as long as they've existed, whereas Indians do have a history of vegetarianism, but not everybody was a vegetarian. And so the argument is really when the Indians who later evolved into Europeans left India and on their journey to become Europeans, did that process change them sufficiently much as to necessitate meat in their diet? The answer may be yes. Like,
Antariksa, this is the first time live streaming, so he's not used to like trolls coming straight at him, calling him a despicable person.
I know what
he's used
are.
to it IRL. He ran
trolls
for Congress.
Are unhappy souls.
He ran for Congress. He's used to it, but like on the internet, anybody could come up and just say the most crazy thing to you and hide their identity. And I enjoy it. Like, I assume Antariksha, I'm trying to get him into streaming, teach him how to use StreamYards. But like, he ran for Congress. He's a Hare Krishna. We've been on street corners together, chanting. I'm sure he can handle it.
I can handle it. I've had to handle it. And I don't enjoy.
We talked earlier about his multiple
suicide
just to argue.
I want to go somewhere.
Antariksha talked earlier today, if people weren't here, about, God forbid, the multiple times in his life he tried to commit suicide.
Well, I'm working on a book now. I told David about it, but I used to be, when I actually had sex reassignment surgery on December 8th, 2000 in Neenah, Wisconsin by Eugene Strang. There it is. It's a fact. And it took me about 13 months to find myself in the hospital suicidal. You know why? Because I realized it didn't make any difference. I'm not male or female. I'm just a human being. Gender is overrated. Gender is being used for everything now, just like race is being overrated. It's temporary. It's not very important, really. It's what's important is ignorance that causes racism, that causes sexism. That's what's important. You're not going to solve the problems of racism and sexism on the level of racism and sexism. That's my preaching. Defeat me.
I don't want to defeat you. I'm just a little curious about how it was when you were a woman.
I don't know how it was when I was a woman. I was accepted as a transgendered woman. But guess what? Guess what? I went to a play once for women only, and I'm sitting out back at Monroe. This is back when the 3 years between 73 and 76. I was smoking a cigarette with a friend, and this person goes, it was in the play, "Hey, boy." And I figured they were talking to me. I turned around, and then the other woman kicked me in the small of the back, and three lesbian separatists jumped and they started beating the shit out of me. And other people jumped and stopped them. But I had two friends that were editors of the magazine. Go down and research. It's called The Front Page. They let me write a poem on the front page about that incident. It was called Progression Out of Anger. And I had separatists. Are you going to sue? Are you going to sue? I didn't sue. What was that going to prove?
He was beat up by women who didn't want him being part of their event because he was transgender.
Yeah.
And other women protected him.
That was in 1974.
Do you have any pictures of how you were when you were a woman?
What difference does it make? Of course I do.
We're just curious.
What difference does it make? I mean, I'm not into just appearances.
And just to mention, I had known Antariksha for over a year before he even mentioned that to me, that he had been transgender. When I met him, he was, the priest at the Hare Krishna temple
Yeah.
giving class in the ashram. And it was like a year later that he informed me that he had, for health reasons, because my father was a doctor and he was going through some sort of issue, and he told me he wasn't feeling good related to it. And maybe like I could ask my dad for some medical advice, but I'd known him a full year and had no idea that he had that history.
I'm very blessed soul, because when 3 years old, I knew I was different in terms of I can't relate to this body I have. Yet I went on to be valedictorian of my high school class, earning 11 of athletic letters, because that was my karma. But I hid out in the open the whole time,
Eric, I suppose we're not clear about what happened. You became a woman, and then you became a man.
When you say become a woman, though, you have to. I want to be more specific. I became a transgendered woman. There's a difference.
Yes. I was just using it as shorthand, really. So
I don't see what my
gender
message is. What I would say to young people, I support anybody that's struggling with their gender identity completely. But I would say to anybody, you're not going to become happy changing your clothes. You're not going to become happy changing your body. You might experience some temporary feeling more comfortable, and that's valid. But
just one second, because I've been getting a lot of trolls. This guy calls himself Spiritual Mamzer, is from Amsterdam, and he probably knows a lot about the topic, but I'm not sure if it's actually him.
Okay, well,
I've been getting people who are just.
This is your show. I don't want to,
Well, I'm trying to have a conversation, but because the topic or people are not nice, so I don't know if that's actually him.
Yeah, probably not fruitful.
Yeah, I mean, people just design themselves as someone else, and
I think that's pretty disingenuous myself.
But I mean, obviously, Antariksa has been preaching this stuff for a long time and is used to dealing with difficult people.
I was wondering if I could.
And also part of interfaith. Part of interfaith is
respect.
I mean, you need to have interfaith. You need a basis of respect, but that respect isn't a given. That you're like, oh, this is my tradition, and this is. Okay, it's a troll. But yeah, saying like when you enter interfaith, that there's a natural minimal level of respect that you need in order to, but that minimal level of respect is not necessarily there on a street corner in society. And even within circles of religious people, to actually trust and take other people seriously to do interfaith, and a minority of people do interfaith because unfortunately, like Antariksa, the senior devotee, I was raised into darkness. Ignorance is the natural condition, and people who have not cured ourselves of the natural condition of ignorance usually aren't capable of respect.
Well, one of the things that the sages say about the age we're living in, there's 3 adjectives that are there for consideration: quarrel, fear, and hypocrisy. And if you look around with an objective mind and keep those adjectives in mind, fear, or not necessarily an adjective, that could be a verb or noun, fear, hypocrisy, and quarrel. The nature of the age we're in is quarrel.
Kali Yuga.
Yeah, Kali Yuga, quarrel. Look at the 20th century, one quarrel after another, bloodletting, millions of people killed. Now we're quarreling about what health is. We're quarreling about how to deal with a virus. What is a virus? Should we lock down each other? And I mean, we've progressed. Talk about quarrel. Whoa. So any kind of human enterprise that can not just be into quarreling is very valuable. Quarrel is just status quo.
Yeah, I mean, it's really respect is the precursor for interfaith, and a lot of times, like Jehovah's Witness, Orthodox Jews generally can't do interfaith, not just because we're not respectful of people, but because no, I don't want to give validity to your beliefs. No, unfortunately, your beliefs I do not believe are true. And maybe I'll respect you as a person, as someone who suffers, but I will not give the respect to you to pretend like I think your beliefs are true.
One of the things that I've learned, about belief is belief doesn't establish the truth. belief has an effect upon you, and it probably has an effect upon how you behave and how you interact in the world. But I can believe something that's not true. I can believe something that's true. I can believe something that's half, it's just, I think it's important for people to agree upon some kind of terms of debate. I mean, if you can't even agree upon what you're talking about, then why even talk?
What relates to the vegetarianism thing is like, no, I mean, unfortunately, our belief system is that killing the cow is basically murder and an extremely culpable thing that if you can't be punished by the hands of man, will be punished for by God. And you could try to say that in a more respectful way, but say if that is what you believe, and you're saying that's the truth. I'm sorry, what it says in Scripture, or if Claire coming at me like I get the most, for my involvement in ISKCON is for idol worship, and so I'm saying
Right.
like no, unfortunately. You're gonna go to hell. Unfortunately, when we reestablish the court
again,
and the
they
no
might
laws,
believe you're going to
I
hell,
could be
Dave.
I could be executed. I mean, saying no. I mean, the court could and should execute me for my crimes of idol worship. And you say, well, that's what the Scripture says. I'm sorry. Like, I like you. You're a nice guy. But if you insist on worshiping those idols, you will be executed because that's what the Scripture says. If you're taking some sort of extreme Islamic or even Judaic or position, and obviously
or Christian.
Yeah, or Christian.
I mean, it's kind of a non-starter. The whole religion is just everything I don't like is idolatry, pretext for killing Hindus. There's no common ground.
I would like to anybody that's really uptight about idols, I would like to talk to them about the concept of what a deity is as contrasted with an idol. You
can't really change their minds because they're stuck in the Christian mindset or the Abrahamic mindset that it's just bad. It's just bad. Bad. It's bad. You're bad.
Well, I mean, you're going to argue that you have a superior understanding of Christianity. So if you're going to say, if they're saying my axioms is the Bible and my understanding that this is the source of morality, and so you either have to say that no, that isn't the source of morality, or you have to take the attitude like no, like you're misunderstanding your own tradition. And so you can't. I mean, that's the purpose of interfaith. But most of the interfaith we've done, and we wanted to talk about interfaith, don't really get to the heart of these debates. They're more like this guy presents either a song or a short speech or a prayer, and people are respectful. Then the next guy, I mean, Rabbi Dorit had that one on Martin Luther King Day at the Universalist Unitarian.
This is recently, or
no, years ago, and that you actually got hundreds of views in that video where you said the verse from Lord Chaitanya. But they had a panel about the various religious approaches towards the use of violence, and the different people gave their interpretation of the religious uses towards religious views towards the use of violence. And there was like 5-minute speeches and maybe a little bit of a discussion. And from all of the DIONs, and there was another one maybe about immigration and hate. But you need respectful to debate where you could say, no, I mean, unfortunately, I do believe karmatically that this is true. Like, if someone say worshiping idol is in fact, does deserve the death penalty. I'm sorry to inform you that. Or you say, yes, killing the cow does mean that you have to take a bad reincarnation. And that's a fact. Like, I could still respect you as a person. How do you have those interfaces? And he's saying that, Rabbi Dorit didn't really have those deep conversations. There are kind of like these respectful, one person presents or sings a song, then the next person presents and sings a song, and so on till everybody presents, and then and then that's it. That's the program, as opposed to the deeper delving of these issues. My religion says killing the cow is 100% okay, and your religion says killing the cow is one of the most egregious activities possible. My religion says you're supposed to have deities and serve them, and my religion says that people who serve deities are going to hell. And so, how do you have interfaith and really tackle those deep divides?
You asking me that?
Well, yeah, that's what we're here to talk about.
Okay.
I mean, you're starting Leon in Lansing, so you're just going to do it like Rabbi Dorit, and it's going to be respectful, where a bunch of people give a presentation and then have a little bit of food after, or you're going to have get to the heart of these.
Well, you know, when the
differences.
Vietnam War was raging, they couldn't even agree upon the shape of a table to negotiate around in France, or in Paris. But that was a start. You know, so as long as you don't think it's all just about what the shape of a table is, i.e., just get together and you're respectful. At least if you're really, I'm interested in Islam. I have Islamic friends. One of my deepest friends is a devout Islamic person. He chants Hare Krishna. And there's no contradiction, because Krishna is simply a name. There's a way to understand religion that's not conflictory. But there's a way to understand religion that you were talking about is total conflict, and it's meaningless. Basically, it's quarrel. It's the nature of the age. And so, at least if people don't have it, if people are totally into I have the only truth, then just let them have it. You know, if they don't want to talk about anything, that's like there in my hometown in Indiana. All Christian churches, but there was an article in the local newspaper from a philosopher and religion professor, and so, but he was waxing poetic about lava coming out of, Iceland now, how that is the living creation. Okay, that's cool. I like that. So why can't we talk about different names of God, the one supreme God with unlimited names? Prabhupada was asked once by a reporter out in Los Angeles, what do you think about the Quran and the Bhagavad Gita and the Bible? They all are different. Prabhupada goes, no, they're not. He goes, what do you mean by the no, they're not? He says, the essence of all of them is to learn how to love God. Aren't they?
I really wouldn't say that that's a fact. And I'd say people that say that are muddying the waters. And ultimately, the Abrahamic traditions think that everything we believe is evil and that we deserve to die.
What?
Well, that's the history. How many people died for Christianity?
No, God, millions and millions.
And what was the pretext for that? It was all because of idolatry. They even called math idolatry. So I don't see it your way at all.
Yeah, I have a friend that it wasn't new to his idea, but they make a distinction between Jesus and Paulianity. And then you can trace, what the Catholic Church has done to people who don't believe correctly down through the ages. It's hellish. It's horrible, But at the same time, you can look at the essence of what Jesus was talking about. And, you can even take the King James Version. Jesus, they leave it in there. The Father is greater than I am. Yet the doctrine of the Trinity is the coterminous, co-equal.
It's not the same God. I'm sorry, it's not the same God that they worship as Krishna. So it's really, I think you have good intentions, but you're deceiving people with what you're saying, unfortunately.
Say it again.
I said, I think what you're saying is well-intentioned, but is deceiving people. I do not think these religions are compatible in any way, shape, or form. What will happen is that the Abrahamic one will always be stubborn and never change, and then the other one will have to adapt to it, and then eventually it'll just be the Abrahamic stuff, like it is with Christianity. Christianity used to be way more pagan, and now it's not hardly pagan at all.
Oh, so it's not really Gandalf, our educated defender of the Germanic people that might take the argument to say actually multiculturalism is not compatible. To say meat eating is the way of the blue-eyed man, and vegetarianism bullshit. Is the way of the Indian.
It's just asserted beliefs. That's all it is.
Well, I mean, you say you dealt with the Klan and various people, and say integration is the problem because different people have different ways.
People can change.
And the fact is, like, if you're in India, killing the cow is bad, and if you're in Europe, killing the cow is good. And if you try to go to India and convince them to eat meat,
a lot of people don't believe in killing the cow in Europe now. Probably more than ever. Don't believe in killing the cow in Europe.
So people blame that on multiculturalism to say vegetarianism is a weapon against Europeans, and that vegetarian is a tool to destroy European culture. And I'm going to present those arguments, and so the people are trolling me. They're not coming on like the Klan. I guess you dealt with the Klan. They didn't necessarily sign up for a formal debate. So I'm not going to, God forbid, give the side of the argument of the Klan. But these are the guys that are largely trolling me. Here's my half tribe's brother from Montreal that does workout videos. I don't know his thoughts on multicultural. I mean, he's generally pro multicultural. Do you know the Hare Krishnas in Montreal? Do you see them? Do you talk with them, memes?
I haven't been to Montreal in almost 20 years this year.
I forgot where you're located, but I mean, you're familiar with the Hare Krishna movement?
I'm located in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Okay.
I am not. I apologize.
I mean, you see the Hare Krishna devotees in Massachusetts on street corners. You ever speak to them? You ever go to the
am
temple
not
and participate?
exactly sure what you're talking about. I just know that I think you three are supposed to be of that, and apparently I am not.
No,
well, I mean,
we're
Jennifer's
all
not
the
from the
same
Hare
thing.
Krishna movement. She's from, called the general broader Arya Samaj, by saying the Hare Krishnas are the ones on street corners, chanting, playing music, and preaching a form of Krishna consciousness that's similar to Jennifer. But I was making the general culture war that, in some respect, the I deal a lot with white ethno-nationalists as a Jew, people who don't like me because I'm Jewish, and think that I'm a bad influence on European society. And that same argument is and so Jews aren't necessarily pushing vegetarianism, but the same argument against Hindus trying to come, Hare Krishna people trying to preach in Europe, is that vegetarianism is a tool being waged, a tool in the war against Europeans.
Now, are these people just saying this because they don't like those people, so they're looking for an excuse?
Well, I mean, it's a common thing in terms of, I think even Tucker Carlson has made the point. I mean, it's reached not just the level of like David Duke and the Klan, but even lower levels like Tucker Carlson pushing back as vegetarianism being part of this general cultural war.
I haven't heard that at all. He's done that.
He's mentioned a few times like that.
No,
the fear mongering that they're gonna take your meat away from you. Like, if you keep on letting immigrants come into your society, they're gonna take.
I think they're citing a particular report where they gave an example of saying if Americans were to eat like 90% less beef, and they utilize that as a model. So I think medically a lot of people are like, they're going to take away all the cows. Oh my God, the New Deal girl was right. AOC's coming for the bovine.
Yeah, and saying that that's part of an ethno-nationalist, anti-immigration, multicultural, to say you keep on letting immigrants in, they're going to take your meat away. And to say, like, Antariksa Das seems like a nice guy, but he's really waging war against white people by just trying to destroy thousands of years of heritage of meat eating.
I don't know if he's a furry.
Well, I mean, he's a convert, so to say, to Vedic, to Krishna.
Wait, is Kevin Bacon a vegetarian?
What's
that would be amazingly. If Kevin Bacon's a vegetarian, that would be amazingly ironic. I'm curious now.
But I think Prabhupada openly used these terms, and I think even Prabhupada openly used the term war on the West, and that Prabhupada.
No, he didn't present it like that.
He did. I mean, I listened to the thing that it was a war on the West, and vegetarianism was part of it. And it's like, is it zero sum in a certain way? You might do interfaith and be respectful, but you say no. Eventually, you're not going to be able to kill the cow anymore in North America.
Kevin Bacon is not thought to be a vegan, although he does enjoy plant-based meals with his wife, Kara Sedgwick. The couple have been known to dine at vegan restaurants and claim their signature dish is kale salad. That's according to Google.
There you go.
Yeah, I don't have much of a sense of humor. I'm familiar with these arguments, and I've heard the same people who attack me for my Judaism. I've heard attack vegetarianism, and Gandalf, who was here, doesn't have the courage to show up because might be got doxxed and labeled a racist and not allowed to re-enter polite society. There are a lot of people that are anti-vegetarianism, and now, like University of Michigan, most polite society, you have to at least respect and treat vegetarian right, but to a certain point, there are people that don't respect vegetarianism and consider vegetarianism an affront on Western culture. And I don't probably would agree. Yes, vegetarian is an affront on Western culture, and yes, that is our goal: is to stop people from eating meat. And it's like, people who attack the Jews and say, like, you want to end
not
this
by
and that.
force, though, David.
Well, does it make a difference whether it's by force or not?
Yes,
So
it does.
you're not forcefully
it makes all the difference.
Well, in your opinion, but you're saying you do agree
No,
you are trying. You're not forcefully trying to take over the West, but you are trying to take over the West.
David,
just because you're not forcefully trying to take over the West doesn't mean you're not trying to take over the West.
Wait a second. People are competing for power? That would never happen.
I'm in Jimi Hendrix camp. I can't wait when people fall more in love with love than the power of love. The love of power. There's a distinction there. Spiritual life has nothing to do with coercion. Nothing.
Haven't we had vegetarian options for years? I'm pretty sure last time I was on a plane, they have vegetarian. Like, this is not necessarily new. Oh, how dare people utilize capitalism to promote their views more?
By saying, like Rush Limbaugh, this is the defeat of the right. The vegetarian options to the, so to say, the hardcore right is part of their defeat. That they're saying it's bad that there's vegetarian options because it's related to multiculturalism and immigration. So I'm assuming Eric as a hippie probably likes multiculturalism. Did
Rush actually say that, David?
I mean, he wouldn't use that strong terminology. Those are more like clan because he would get canceled and called the racist. It's like clan terminology by saying that the problem is multiculturalism and immigration, and once you start respecting people's vegetarian rights, next thing you know, you're gonna, God forbid, the brown hordes are gonna overtake your society.
I just remember I've had some pretty good veggie burgers before where, like, if somebody didn't tell me, I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty tasty. Oh, it's actually got like a similar amount of protein and everything. I'm like, long-term diet and everything. I hear the lab meat is getting tastier and tastier. And if you bring the cost down at that point, it's like, well, why are you going to have to murder animals? I mean, the Almighty said we could take as we need. I just think we've done a lot of things in excess. And if we have the ability to avoid killing other living creatures, I think that's a decent thing.
It's just a sign of the larger cultural wars.
I'm pretty sure the quote is that animals are there for you to do whatever the fuck you want with.
Consent matters.
Well, let's try not
That's
to.
Not
I need a quote. I'm going to need a quote on that because that doesn't sound true.
I don't have a sense of humor really. I'm trying to talk larger issues. Saying if if memes grew up in a younger generation where racism was already frowned upon and multiculturalism or acceptance of progressive values, like I'm already over 40 and can remember.
71.
How do I spell
people
Genesis
discriminating against vegetarianism. When I was younger, vegetarianism was not the norm. And if you said you were vegetarianism, they probably would have yelled at you and told you you're dumb. And they might even have attacked you for trying to destroy Western culture. And Antariksa has been doing this since the 70s.
Here's a story that I tell in my sharing and my cultural, revolutionary work. I say, I was told, I was educated to think I had to eat meat to be healthy. And I stopped eating meat when I was 26. I'm 71 now and I'm healthy. Therefore, that was a perfect example of misinformation that they should be canceled out.
But, I mean, the
I'm
respect,
exaggerating to make a point.
When you were young, they didn't
you have to respect. True. They have to eat meat to be healthy. That's true.
But at your age, there wasn't that level of respect where it's like, oh, you got to respect this guy's wishes. They would have just yelled at you and told you you're wrong, and they might even beat you up, God forbid, and say like, eat that meat, because that respect.
I've never had
multiculturalism was not the norm.
What you were just describing was like being a Democrat in the 90s from certain perspectives. I thought that's a lot of people started becoming progressive. Like, well, I don't want to be a Democrat and everything because a lot of these folks had like Reagan, yeah. I thought that was kind of the transitional mimetic. I could be wrong.
Oh, there was a bill. What's that? Eat that meat or we'll beat you up. Christians.
I don't think that's a direct quote.
Well, that's pretty good humor, though.
Well, and then you get even worse where you're going to say like, no, that's not really the meaning of Christianity. Let me explain to you Jesus's real meaning. And so the Christian, like, I do not need you to explain to me Christianity.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's kind of the problem, with interfaiths. You're coming, no, the problem is that you don't really understand Christianity. So I'm going to explain to you Christianity. And then you're just like, no, I understand that there's a culture war going on. And
I can make an argument that nobody,
the problem is immigration
understands Christianity. How about that?
I mean, it's like they say, I don't have a, like, I mean, God forbid I hear people who don't like Rashida Tlaib. It's like, I don't have a problem with Rashida Tlaib. The problem with Rashida Tlaib is she's in America. And because she's in America, she's just doing what she does. And so, of course, she's doing that. But, you know, if she wasn't in America, we wouldn't
She's a Detroit legislator, or she's
a
representative
so there's
in the
vegetarianism
House?
in general. I don't have a problem with vegetarian. The problem is immigration. The problem is these people are in America. And once they're in America, they're going to try to destroy our culture by pushing things like vegetarianism.
Well, that's pretty narrow definition of what American culture can be. American culture
can be pluralistic. I brought up Genesis. It's 29. Then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. 30. And to all beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give you every green plant for food, and so on.
So nothing about take only what you need, more like stuff your face and leave nothing for anyone in your wake.
I mean, I'm trying to have a very egalitarian,
well, making the point that Jennifer
interpretation.
is openly saying that your religion is false. This is your scripture. This is what it says, and it's false.
Technically,
and so it is basically a war. So it's saying that it is a war on the West. The wars say, like, no, unfortunately, your scripture is factually untrue. I'm sorry.
Is that just our interpretation?
Well, then you're going to come like, now you're the rabbi, now you're the priest, and you're going to tell me how to understand my own religion and my own ancestors. I had 1,000 years of butchers in my family. And you're like, no, the problem is your 1,000 years of butchers in your family didn't understand their own religion. So now I'm going to reveal the true understanding of your scripture. Or you say like, no, I'm sorry, they were just wrong. They subscribe to some false doctrine. And that's why I said, like, okay, the problem is immigration. The problem is the people are here in America in the first place, and that's the pushback. Usually it's anti-immigration. It's like Tucker Carlson mentioned that, say anti-vegetarianism is part of the anti-immigration perspective. If you're anti-immigration, then that you could add to that anti-vegetarianism, that vegetarianism is part of the multicultural agenda. Like, no, everybody doesn't get to, you don't have to respect everybody in their culture and their religion and say, oh, that's nice that that's what you do and you deserve to be respected. He's like, no, this is our land, our people settled it, our ancestors have been here, this is our way of life, and if you don't like it, get out of here. So I mean, that's more of the straight hard clan debate. And Eric mentioned that himself, that when he bought the farm and he started bringing Indians out there, the clan got on him and said, like, who the hell is Indian people? We don't want them here. God forbid, that's what you dealt with. I mean, you said that earlier. You dealt with that. You had clan people attacking you.
No, I didn't say that, David. I said that the person I was trying to buy the farm from, a 88-year-old gentleman named Harold Henry, I played music with, and
he didn't mind you. He just didn't like your dark-skinned friends. Okay, you were good, but when you start bringing your dark-skinned friends, that was when the problems happened. God forbid.
Well, that's one of the reasons he didn't want to sell the farm to me.
Yeah, you said
that's racism on his part.
Yeah, and saying that's a norm. God forbid.
I didn't reject him. I didn't stop seeing him. I didn't stop playing music with him. I told him how I thought about it. So I thought you weren't a racist, Harold, but I guess you are, and that's okay. I mean, you can't help it, or you don't want to help it. That's fine. You're more than that. Harold was a Christian mystic that didn't understand the word eternity. I said, Harold, you talk about the eternality of the soul after death, and you laugh at me about talking about the eternality of the soul before birth. And why? Because 20 centuries of indoctrination about one lifetime. It's cognitive dissonance. It's not even logical thinking.
Well, this is why they called Christians atheists back in the day, because they didn't believe in reincarnation.
Well, in a sense, I think that's what most of them are. My dad, my dad chides me for why are you still in that cult? I tell him, I said, Dad, there's more people in my cult than are in Christianity all over the world. There's more. I mean, it's meaningless.
I mentioned that me and Jennifer, a big issue. I always believed in reincarnation from my Jewish education, and me and Jennifer, one of the topics we talked about.
I believe in cause and effect.
But I've informed people in ISKCON, people don't know the history, that in Europe, you could be punished for death. The not only during the Inquisition and the name slipping now, but like gypsies giving telling people the origins of their soul was punishable by death for hundreds of years in Europe. And, you know, so Jennifer, her bigger issue is not, you know, vegetarian, but reincarnation.
David, are you familiar with this book right here? It's a famous book. Have you read it, Jennifer?
Oh, yeah. Show the author.
No.
What's the name of the author? Hoffman or something like that? I know the book. My father actually showed me that book when I was in high school.
It's by oh gosh, who is it? Charles Maclay.
Okay, I think my father recommended that book in high school.
It's an excellent book. Over in they had things called prickers. Walked around Ireland, and if they pricked you and they figured you were a witch, you get burnt at the stake on their authority as a accurate pricker. Well, what if it's a fake pricker? You know,
what you just said just is incredibly mimetic, because you went back a couple hundred years. Pricker has a far different definition up here. It's those little things that get stuck to your pant legs when you're kind of going through the woods and everything. Those are our prickers over here. Dude, I stepped on a rusty nail like yesterday at work, and it's like, oh, you've been a tetanus shot in 10 years. I look back, I'm like, yeah, the last shot I had was in 2010, and I don't even know if it was for tetanus. I don't want lockjaw. The sheer fact, like, had I stepped on that nail 300 years ago and gotten cut by a rusty blade, I'd be dead in like 30 days. Lockjaw does not look pleasant. Modern medicine is amazing.
Well, I mean, if we talk about interfaith, and, you know, so you have to have a certain level of respect just to enter the conversation. So it's like, we have a monolithic culture, you know, if it's ethno-nationalist or civic or religious, that we're not interested. We're not interested in new people trying to come here and teach us new ways, and we don't want to respect you and your beliefs and your way of life. So interfaith, you have to at least open up some level of respect. And if even like in, you know, Antariksa's small town where he comes from, where there's only Christians, and it's like Catholics and Protestants, and, you know, they're all white people and Christians, but just various sects, that, you know, you say, okay, do we really want to enter interfaith with the Catholics? And then, you know, what it comes, like the Jews and the Muslims and the Hindus and, you know, the pagans in these various people, where interfaith is part of a multicultural agenda. And like,
there was interfaith conflict with like the Irish Catholics and stuff like that, because I mean, that was a point in history as well, apparently, because I happen to be part Irish as well. I hear about these things, but overall, I'm a mutt. I'm all these different. Apparently, I'm like one half Nepalese or something like that too, according to like my mom's like ancestry or whatever they did.
Well, so I mean, saying interfaith is it caught up with multiculturalism, and say, okay, we already live in a multicultural society. So here in Metro Detroit, these groups already exist, and, you know, there might be immigration levels, but, you know, like Rashida Tlaib already lives here. There's already Muslims and Jews and Hindus and all these various people who have an interfaith, as opposed to Antariksa's town, where you know, there is no mosque, there is no synagogue, there is no Hindu temple. And saying that, you know, what happens is like, oh, should we include the Muslims in the interfaith? And he's like, yeah, or, you know, verse, you know, is like pushing. Well, see, I don't know if you want to call it an anti-Western agenda that you know, is interfaith intuitively like an anti-Western agenda. And
I would say it's not Christian supremacists. And up until
like in India, they don't let Christians. They don't let Christian missionaries in. You're saying that they don't have interfaith in India like that. They say it's anti-Indian agenda to you know, try converting people to Christianity. And you're saying, why should we extend, hypothetically, why should we extend that same privilege to Indians in the West if they don't extend it to us in India?
Iran has a seat in parliament reserved for, I think, the Jewish folks.
But India, that doesn't allow Christian missionary activity. So why should Christians allow Hindus to come in and proselytize in their countries if India doesn't allow Christians to come and proselytize in their country?
India does allow Christians to come and proselytize. They are proselytizing.
Yeah, but I don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's a major problem.
We said it's a problem. So if it
is a major problem, but
well, I'm giving the parallel.
Major problem.
If Christians missionizing in India is a major problem, is that parallel to people saying the vegetarian agenda in America is a major problem?
I would say no, because the Europeans were forced to become Christian, and therefore the conversion is not legitimate.
I think Jen's basically making Eric's point, where if you're forcing somebody to it, it's like, all right, you can do this or you die. How much of a choice is that?
That's
really?
Not acceptable.
Yeah, they
Well,
didn't
I'm
convert
talking
in their
about
heart,
meat eating.
so I don't consider it to be a legitimate conversion. So I don't think it's the same at all.
Well, I mean, so if you're trying to liberate Western people from Christianity, that might be slightly different than, say, convince them to become vegetarian, because likely meat eating is intrinsically something that blue-eyed European people have thousands of year history of meat eating, and that vegetarianism is an affront on Western culture.
I just ate a whole bunch of feathered friends. I apologize.
You don't have to apologize.
Well, you should. No, I'm saying I'm not, saying God, but you're saying no. I mean, unfortunately, that's
I'm
bad
just saying
karma.
if we could grow and get it on scale.
But I'm just saying that
I'm open.
Antariksha Das, you're the Prabhupada disciple. It's like, no, that is bad karma. Like, I'm sorry to inform you. Like, I'm not gonna, beat you up for eating. I'm not gonna, try to take punitive actions. Like, memes will probably beat me up. But like, no, I'm here to inform you that's bad karma. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. This is why I say Duvid lives his convictions, because I don't think everybody necessarily does. Because Duvid will say something, and now he's saying something to me. He is living his convictions.
Did Hitler live his convictions?
Antariksha Das is the devotee. I was the one who had the courage to say that was bad karma. Antariksha Das didn't even have the courage to tell you that was bad karma.
Well, I think he's looking at it from a different perspective.
He didn't have to apologize. There's a difference, David. I don't need to be apologized to if somebody's going to do what they think is right. I don't have to think it's right at all. Prabhupada never told people
that's bad karma.
And Prabhupada, a famous time Prabhupada met with a gigantic Catholic leader in France. He was saying animals don't have any souls. Animals don't have any souls. And they talked for a long time. Prabhupada only would say, well, what's this thing? Thou shalt not kill. It only applies to murdering humans, huh? And that's still an ongoing discussion.
There is mimetic information out there that, according to my sources, all dogs do go to heaven.
There you go. The Rainbow Bridge. According to Krishna consciousness, dogs are simply eternal spirit souls in dog's body for a lifetime. That makes sense to me. Nothing else does. You can, the Gita says, you can speculate for billions of years, be much smarter than Einstein, not know the first thing about God, actually.
I remember I was doing Harinam in Royal Oak. I think it was actually Siddharth, maybe Advaita, maybe Deva Madhava Das. And we were talking to some people who were smoking. I was like, don't preach to people while they smoke. And they did it. It's like, I don't mind people smoking, but like I want a conversation, like memes is on the internet. So like the smoke isn't getting in my face. And like, if it was marijuana, maybe it wouldn't bother me. But yeah, I mean, you could, what's the level of respect versus saying like, no, I mean, unfortunately, according to my belief system, what you're doing is not only bad for yourself, it's bad for society. And like, as a person who defends the Jews, I got people all the time telling me that, no, I'm sorry, like you said, Hitler living his convictions, God forbid, that say like, no, you might think you're a good person in this, but like, no, what you're doing is bad for society. And if that's part of your belief system, interfaith requires respect. But at the same time, like, well, I'm going to be honest, and my religion teaches that what you're doing is bad. I'm sorry. And you're saying like, can you say that or can you not say that?
I apologize.
I think there can be.
I was just making that as the point.
Dialogue.
You're not blowing in my face. It's just on the internet.
What's wrong with agreeing to disagree as we move along, as opposed to killing each other?
Because as your belief system, you say that no, unfortunately, what you're doing is wrong. And like I may not be a cop. I'm not trying to force you to stop from wrong behavior. But here we are trying to do an interfaith, intercultural discussion. And if I'm representing my belief system says what you're doing is wrong.
I also don't need to get
hurt by
somebody that disagrees with me on the internet. That's the thing. Duva can disagree with me. Okay, we are adults. We can move on.
That's how the Christians put it. You're an idolater. You're an idolater. You're an idolater. And if you don't meet them on that field, they'll eventually overwhelm you.
There are different kinds of. I'd say there are different kinds of Christians. I think some Christians are more enlightened than others.
I don't think any of them are enlightened at all. And I think people like you muddy the waters and make it harder for people like me to tell the truth.
Is it just
that's your belief. That's your, what's your belief? Sister, what's your belief about what is the truth?
Jen, are you coming over to my side about the legalization of dueling?
Well, I was never against the legalization of dueling. I said you had to make it clear as to what would constitute an allowable duel, and then you didn't go any further with that. You just keep going up with dueling. You're starting to sound like the Christians with idolatry. It's like, we already went over this. You didn't go any further into what it would take to legitimize it. I think you're just not serious.
I was attempting, but between Dubid's rambles and my offending you about breaking the universe, it was hard to get in some words.
Well, dueling has its source in Catholic culture, so it's come to say, my scripture says that eating meat is okay, and so you've just said that my scripture is false. You have attacked my honor, and now I have to challenge you to a fight to the death. I'm sorry, because you have attacked my honor, you have accused my scripture of being false, and the only way to resolve that is a fight to the death. And even in Vedic culture, well, I'm saying that was somewhat like Catholic European culture. Even in Vedic culture, that if you're a warrior and someone calls out your honor, or someone calls out the honor of the scripture, at some point you have to accept a duel. Like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you insult my scripture. And if you insist on doing it, we're going to have to fight to the death. And even Prabhupada said that the definition of a warrior is, if you're a Kshetriya, you have to accept a fight. Doesn't matter if you're going to lose. Like a memes could beat me up easily and I'd stand a 0% chance. It doesn't matter. If he calls out my scripture, I have to call him to a duel, even if I'm going to lose, because the honor of my belief system, my scripture.
David, here's an idea. When two nation states declare war on each other, that's declaring a duel between two nation states, which in a sense are two persons. Only it's a lot of persons representing one person.
Yeah, I'm saying so.
Dueling is very legal, of course.
Whether it's related to interfaith.
It's human behavior.
The reason we do interfaith the way we do, and just have people exchange pleasantries and do a song or prayer and don't have serious arguments, is because at the heart of it, we don't agree that each other's scripture is true. And there could be a religious dictate in almost in fundamentalist of any tradition, including Hindu, that at the point, once you accuse my scripture of being false, the only resolution is war. So you think my scripture is false, my scripture comes from God, and we have to go to war. And to some extent, breakdown of interfaith or failed interfaith is to some extent the cause of war.
I apologize.
You're not going to apologize. You're trying to make the point of
but isn't that how, if somebody is offended, somebody apologizes so you can avoid said conflict? I thought that was the point of dialogue.
Well, you showed the verse in Genesis, so if you're just going to say your scripture is wrong, and so what am I supposed to do? Is like, well, this person.
I don't say Genesis.
Okay, I respect your opinion. We'll both go on living, or you say no, our scripture is right. It's given, ordained by God, and the God that said my scripture is right will be the same God that's going to lead my side to victory in war, which is basically based on interfaith in religious belief. Like you're saying, we're not going to allow Christian missionaries in India because our scripture says it like this. And if you say our scripture is false and should be abolished, that's basically a call to war. And the only way to resolve it is essentially violence.
Like what happened to all the Europeans for all those hundreds of years under Christian persecution that they still can't face.
Now, isn't this basically everything that we have from basically most of the old school scriptures? Isn't this mankind's interpretation of what we were told, and mankind by our definition are imperfect creatures and sinners? And
well, that's the point. Is the point of interfaith for you to inform me what your scripture says and I'm skipping to it, or is it for you to attack my system? Is like, David, don't take your scripture so seriously. Like, do you really think your scripture is the word of God? It's like, of course I do. Like, that's why I'm doing this stuff. And you're saying but so how do you do interfaith besides you presenting what you believe? Where's the room because the axioms and principles. So if the Bible is built upon meat eating being okay, and Vedic culture is built upon meat eating not being okay, is there any common ground other than eventually we're going to have to fight it out on the battlefield, and you're going to have to pick a side?
There's theoretically secularism, science. That the only one who can do science is me. So that's the only real way that it could possibly work.
Do you all like baked goods? Because maybe
I always make fun of Jennifer that she would be what Prabhupada called the Mayavadi. I mean, she's part of Vedic tradition. Area. I don't know if Antariksa. Are you familiar with Dayananda Saraswati and the Arya Samaj? I mean, I know you work with people. Arya Samaj is here big in Michigan.
When we
and there's
pray
a lot
to
of people from
Srila
the Arya Samaj
Prabhupada,
that
there are
come
two
to.
things we pray about. You know, the second part of the pranam is Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nirvasesha Shunyavadi Pachachade Shatarani. The translation is that our humble obeisance unto you, servant of Saraswati. You've kindly come to the Western countries preaching the message of Lord Chaitanya to try to help the Western countries which are suffering from the concepts of impersonalism and voidism. That's it.
I mean, that sounds pretty good. I'm not exactly sure what it means, but...
Well, let me tell you what it means in 25 words or less. Voidism is the belief that there is void. Einstein could not figure out, from one way of looking at it, this unified field theory, because he believed he was a voidist. He had voidism in his thought process. He couldn't use space to connect galactical movement and electron movement. And
you know how you always try to undermine my science theory memes? That's voidism. You got fuck all, but you still think you can needle me.
Voidism is a concept.
I'm just giving him an example of why he embodies the voidist.
Man, Jennifer, you're gonna have to make me. You're gonna. I'm not gonna be able to monetize the video because of Jennifer's language. You're gonna have to put in the setting that there's been adult language used because of Jennifer.
I did too. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's all right, but it's saying like we are on YouTube and saying like no, it's not like a bar or a street corner. It's digitalized, and you know, like the censor will pick up like those words, and I'll have to put on the setting like that kids. You know, it's like it's rated R.
Look at our friend Darwin. That's he's a very brilliant man. He had a good idea, and his idea was so brilliant that it's casting its shadow for centuries now, not centuries, decades and decades, and it's still going on, and that's fine. I recognize that. But I can also disagree with Darwin that he's you know, he's just trying to explain life on a completely material basis. That's okay too. But it's voidist.
Jen, I apologize for what Duvid's about to share. I came out with my own theory of everything.
Oh, guys.
Before I went to the hospital to get my tetanus shot, I'm like, just in case, I'm putting out my unified field theory of everything. Oh,
so you're the second person today who's told me they have a unified field model. The second.
Well,
you know,
take a look.
A lot of people have it.
Take a look.
It's got to make predictions, definitions, axioms. If you don't have those things, I don't care about your model.
David, can you please just share it? It's okay. Yeah. You don't have to keep it up for long.
Yeah, and since we have Antariksa here, who you know, is a Prabhupada disciple, maybe we'll have him try to explain what is a Mayavadi and why according to ISKCON, Prabhupada being a Mayavadi is so bad. And you know, God forbid the joke STFU.
You want to hear it?
Well, it's in brackets. Stuff plus things times force equals the universe.
Okay, I just saw the you know, God forbid.
Memes. You believe in multiple universes?
You'd have to better define what you're talking about. If you're talking about different branch, here's the thing. Again, stuff and things, matter plus energy times the forces acting upon them equal the universe or us. If I arrange it in different ways, it might actually offend people more. But I'm just trying to have some fun with it. That's all.
Let me give 3 verses that describe the dance of energies that Krishna is telling Arjuna about. They're old words, but they make sense. These are all energies: earth, water, fire, air, space, all gross, the Mahabhut, gross material energies. And the subtle, this is just a theory, subtle material energy, mind, intelligence, and your misunderstanding of who you are as matter. But then the very next verse, Krishna says, but besides these inferior, subtle material and gross material energy, there's a superior energy of mind, which are all conscious entities which are manipulating that and moving the universe. That's the idea. And nothing I've ever heard made any sense like that. And nobody, and I can't, I've asked people to try to defeat it and they can't. They cannot. They can't defeat it. If we agree upon terms, the dance of energies. Here's the problem. Mayavadis only accept one energy, matter.
Well, matter and energy.
A priori. The assertion is there's only matter. You can't argue with that.
Well, it's like pantheism. Jennifer is generally a pantheist. Is
It doesn't prove anything. It just
is pantheist
assertion.
Mayavadi, saying that, Prabhupada spent much time attacking Mayavadis, and you say if you're a pantheist who thinks the universe is God, like I'm God, you are God, is that a Mayavadi, or saying a Mayavadi is a materialist, or are all pantheists who think that everything is God Mayavadis?
Well, if the universe is God, then we're part of God.
No, universe is not a person. God's a person.
But
that's my assertion.
Right. So I would disagree with that, right? Lots of people would disagree with that.
Are you a person?
I'm in a person body, yes.
What is a person body? That's the question. That's the question.
It has a entangled photon field and a centralization complex, namely a brain.
Definitions of matter.
Yeah. Well, is photons matter because it has no mass?
Well, I've been studying science since I had a great high school physics teacher. I love physics.
Answer the question. Answer the question. Is light matter?
Yes.
Okay. So everything is matter then, and you can't disprove that.
No. Light is an effulgence for the sun in the sky. How long is the sun in the sky gonna last?
Until it burns out.
Yeah.
And that was brought about by matter, and it will return.
And it all happened by chance.
You want to say that there's randomness in the universe? The burden of proof is on you to establish where it originates.
No.
I don't think you're disagreeing. I thought Eric said that it was matter.
Yeah, light's matter, of course.
So he's saying that I'm a materialist and that's somehow bad because I don't worship.
I didn't say that.
The person in the sky. So again, this is just Christianity superimposed.
No, I think you're just arguing to argue.
Nah,
it's my opinion.
Well, he's saying God is a man. It's an important question.
I didn't say God's a man. Hell, Jesus Christ, God's a woman. Come on.
You're saying God is a centralized consciousness.
No, I'm not.
I want Antariska.
No, I'm not.
Clarify this.
That's impersonalism.
Antariska is a Prabhupada disciple who was the biggest attacker, probably of Mayavadis, in the East or the West. And clarify is.
And he did it in a loving
Jennifer,
way.
According to Prabhupada, a Mayavadi?
Probably.
Prabhupada wasn't a materialist. He attacked materialists in a gentle way. He challenged them to defeat him, and they can't.
I could defeat him.
No, you can't.
I have a unified
all you can do is assert that there's just matter, Jennifer. That's all you can do is assert it.
And my assertion of matter will make all the predictions unlike your model.
Do it. I think you found yourself a debate to set up.
That's another assertion.
And I can prove it, unlike anything you say.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can. I can prove it to standard pramanas, unlike anything you say. I actually know what the pramanas are. I actually know what the tradition is that involves pramanas. What pramanas are you using to make your proof?
I'm using the Vedic scriptures as I learned them from my spiritual master.
So nothing from the Veda and just the Bhagavad Gita, a latter-day Christianized scripture.
No, not a latter-day Christianized scripture. My God.
I'm afraid the Bhagavad Gita is a latter-day Christianized scripture.
Have you read the Bhagavad Gita?
Christ himself is
Have you read the Bhagavad Gita as it is? And let's talk about the Bhagavad Gita as it is. Not as 595 other interpretations by human beings that want to make a profit out of Krishna's words.
Her guru is a critic of ISKCON in general. So we had the debate, but her guru is a critic of ISKCON in general.
Well, who is this? Who is your guru, Mata, or mother, or sister?
Well, he's based in New Zealand, but he's based in New Zealand, and I'm not sure that he's like an enemy of ISKCON, but I think theologically he's a critic of ISKCON, and Prabhupada might consider her and him Mayavadis, and that's why we might as well have this debate since you're both here. And Antariksa Das is a Prabhupada disciple, and like Antariksa is a man of respect. He does interfaith. No, he's not going to attack you or your guru, but he's been doing this as majority of his adult life.
I have a god brother that passed away. His name is Sadaputa. Dr. Richard Thompson took his PhD in statistics at MIT. He wrote a book, and he used the concept of virtual reality to describe what he called Maya. It's a beautiful book, and it's based upon what I'm talking about, making a distinction between energies. Monists don't make any distinction between energies. It's all within. It rides under the assertion of everything is matter. That's it. And if you're doing that, you're never going to get out. You're never going to get beyond the assertion that life is matter. Soul is bullshit. There's no such thing as soul. It's just bullshit. It's imagination. It's a God delusion. I could go on, and on. But things, have consequence. Ideas have consequences. We all know. They have tremendous consequence. I guess I scared everybody away.
Did she go, Jennifer? Okay, I was showing the background. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I asked her to just define what a person is, and she couldn't do it. She wouldn't do it.
Well, she karmatically, she claims her computer froze. So, the power of the Prabhupada disciple was so much that it froze her computer.
I'm nothing, David. I just, But being
a Prabhupada disciple does carry karmatic influence, possibly.
Yeah, I guess. No, Dave, I think one of the things that's come up is really important is I'm seeing a deeper understanding of interfaith than ever.
Well, that's what I want to really expect you. Oh, here she is. She's back.
Okay, she's back. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey, sorry, my computer.
I'm sorry for yelling at you.
Don't mess with a Prabhupada disciple, Jennifer. It will freeze your computer. Bad things happen to people who mess with Prabhupada disciples.
I don't mean to be offensive, Jennifer. I get passionate. I'm sorry.
It's fine. I mean, I've dealt with Hare Krishnas before.
Well, I'm not a Hare Krishna. You think I'm a Hare Krishna?
Well, you're a Prabhupada devotee.
Yes, I am. I'll take that. I'll take that.
Okay, yeah. So I've had a lot of this type of attitude from Prabhupada devotees, and it hasn't given me a great impression. Can you blame me? I spent decades trying to bring the Vedic knowledge to the West, only to get pissed on by Prabhupada devotees.
To the West?
Well, arguably, I'm the only one who's succeeding.
In her own way. I mean, she's trying to bring Vedic knowledge more
I have to ask you, what is Vedic knowledge then?
Well, I mean, she's from Arya Samaj, and they actually debate, what is the proper scripture, and even whether the Bhagavatam is authoritative scripture or what is Veda.
Now, there's all kind of controversy about how the Bhagavatam became existent in this world, of course, and I accept that. It's the truth. There's all kind of different ideas about how the Bhagavatam came about. There's hundreds of different translations of the Gita. There's all kind of Lord Chaitanya was born in 1486, only here 48 years. He preached the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, and a few hundred years after he left, there was about 13 or 14 different interpretations of his life. It's Kali Yuga. I use my little God-given brain best I can, and nobody's ever made sense to me like Prabhupada. He lives. We talked about it's important to not be hypocritical. That means to be saying one thing and doing another.
Right. And if
it doesn't mean though, that doesn't solve it. But just because you do what you're saying doesn't establish the veracity of what you're doing.
What establishes veracity is pramanas.
Well, Bob, what do you mean? Explain that to me.
So you don't know what pramanas are?
I don't know what you mean by it. Of course I do, but I want to know what you mean by it.
They're the standard methods of acceptance of proof, and different schools accept different pramanas. So your BTFO proof will meet the pramanas of all the schools.
Have you ever read the work of Jiva Goswami?
No.
I would suggest that he's a disciple of Lord. Well, he's a disciple of Lord Chaitanya.
I just consider it offensive for you to be giving me advice.
I'm not giving you advice. You're
saying I should read a book. That's advice.
Oh, I'm sorry then. No, I wouldn't mind if you advised me to read a book or suggested I read a book.
That's great, but you're not that serious of a devotee. I mean, if you don't know what pramanas are.
You said, I will ask you what you meant by that.
Mm-hmm. And how do you use pramanas? How do you use pramanas to establish that you're right? How do you use pramanas to establish that you're right? You don't.
What?
I said, how do you use pramanas to establish that you're right? And the answer is, you don't.
What do you mean by that? Explain it a little bit further.
Pramanas are accepted means of proof.
Yes. Is
So which
personal
pramanas do
experience
you accept?
is personal experience one of those?
No. There's
I
the
disagree.
Sharvaka school.
I disagree. I disagree.
Well, you're not entitled to disagree. These are established
I'm not
schools.
entitled to disagree.
No, you are not entitled to disagree with the established schools unless you have a very good reason for doing so, which would involve starting your own school.
No, it doesn't. That's your assertion, Jennifer. My God in heaven. You're so
well,
fucking...
you're acting like the tradition has no structure whatsoever, and now you can
No,
just
I'm
come
not
in
at
and
all.
hippishly impose
I'm not
whatever
at all.
kind of
I'm a
structure you
disciple of
want.
a guru in a tradition that
That's
has a
great.
difference of opinion than your teacher. That's all.
Well,
You're acting
supposedly
like
it's
your
just
teacher
one
has the only...
tradition.
No, you're acting like your teacher has the only proper understanding of the Vedas, and I disagree. You say I can't disagree, so that we're done talking, I guess.
I think you're misconstruing what I'm saying.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to understand what you're saying. I asked you what a person was, and you didn't give me any good answer.
I did give you a perfectly good answer.
What did you say?
I said it was an entangled waveform associated with a human, which requires a brain.
Well, you know,
she has a degree in physics, and I
So
she was a professor of created writing. I don't know.
I don't think a brain is a source of consciousness at all.
It's
Maybe
not.
you don't either.
It's not a source of consciousness. The consciousness, the source of consciousness is everything. Consciousness has no beginning, therefore it's eternal. Therefore, it's an axiom.
Is it impersonal?
Yes, universal
if
consciousness is
impersonal. If the ultimate cause is impersonal, then why do we call ourselves persons?
Because we evolved, and
how the hell did that happen?
Through the laws of physics.
If there's no lawgiver, how do there become laws?
Well, there is a lawgiver, and it's God, and God is impersonal.
Well, Prabhupada agrees with you, Jennifer.
Then why is he so fixated on a personal avatar?
Prabhupada teaches that God is both personal and impersonal simultaneously. That's the truth.
So that's
the only ongoing debate forever is which part do you want to focus on? That's all.
Well, that's like saying something is hot and cold at the same time. That sounds a bit crazy.
The universe is hot and cold at the same time.
Well, some parts of the universe are hot and some parts are cold, but there's no such thing as being hot and cold at the same time.
Well, Lord Chaitanya taught a philosophy called a chincha, beta tattva. It means simultaneously one and difference. It's inconceivable.
Well, that's great. That doesn't make it logically sound.
Well, you just said that, but you haven't even let me explain it to you.
Well, tell me how something could be both personal and impersonal without one taking priority over the other.
God can't be both personal and impersonal at the same time?
One would have to take priority.
Yes, and that's the personal part.
See, again, where do you get that idea?
Where do you get the idea that God's supremely impersonal?
Because I look up in the sky at night and I don't see a giant face looking at me being like, what's up?
Yeah, but you're a person. Like, you're a person doing that.
Look, I can prove that impersonalism is better than personalism based strictly on results, okay? Because it's a better calibration, because impersonalism is a larger vector between your subjectivity and objectivity than personalism is, okay?
Well, I don't agree with that, but I could give you the polar opposite of that. I can say
you could try to prove the opposite, but you wouldn't be able to.
I'm not trying to prove anything. We're talking about God being both personal and impersonal simultaneously.
You're trying to establish that position as valid. You're trying to prove it.
Yeah.
So don't deny that you're trying to prove it. That's part of the tradition, is trying to prove things.
Well, if you give me a chance to try to prove it, I'm watching Mr.
I'm familiar with what your theology is. I already know what your positions are.
And you reject it.
I don't reject everything about it. I'm sure there's stuff in it that's good to go, but there are issues ideologically on the whole, yes.
Yeah.
It's not a black and white thing.
No, it's not. Not at all.
Like I would say, even a religion, if it was completely false, maybe has some value to some people.
Yeah.
So it's never a black and white thing with religion. It's just a question of how to do interfaith, and the only way to do interfaith, I think, that actually makes any sense is with science, something objective you can actually point to things and
Yeah,
be certain
I
about.
agree. No, I agree. That's nice. But
we could do interfaith like we do it, where it's just respectful and people take their
that's
turns
good.
and
They're
do a
both
presentation, and
They're
there's
both
no
good,
real
I think.
discourse or science or logic used. Just like, okay, you speak and you present, and then the next guy speaks and present, and it's interfaith because a bunch of people hear and meet and learn about a bunch of different traditions without like the debate element of trying to get to the truth. Like, well, what's true? Like, it doesn't matter. We're just going to listen and be respectful whether it's true or not.
Well, to a certain point, then we have to all agree that maybe it's important for us to get beyond just that level with interfaith. It's when you acknowledge different beliefs about the same thing, it gets really challenging. But I think we can do that. I do that with my family. My father, who's 92 years old, has had both his jabs. My sister, who's 65, has had both of her shots. My brother-in-law's had both his shots. My brother has had both his shots. And they don't waste any time trying to convince me to get a vaccine. And we get along okay. That's more advanced than the world right now, unfortunately.
We say respect is important. I mean, I kept on bringing Biography,
Yeah.
verse, 6:9, or respect. The Lord Chaitanya verse that you said, that got so many views. Respecting all culture, all creations, being as humble as a blade of grass. But there's a different issue of what is the truth and how do you get to the truth. You say, okay, I could be respectful to people who are wrong. I could be respectful to people who are have bad karma, and so on and so on. But the separate issue is I want to know the truth. I want to align myself with the truth. And I could say it's truthful to be respectful to all creation, but it's not truthful to assume that everybody's right. Or maybe there is some like I promote multiple truth. Yes, everybody is right somehow.
I think what Jennifer's saying about evidence is very important, extremely important,
But what role does that have in interfaith? You're saying like if saying that interfaith,
like,
we don't really talk about evidence and truth. It's just
really
about respect and listening to each other, hear each other out.
Well, if somebody has certain beliefs and they live by those beliefs and it brings them happiness, that's strong evidence. According to the idea that Jiva Goswami gives, that a person's own experience is a part of evidence.
I think maybe what you mean is that perception is a valid pramana. Every school accepts perception as a valid pramana. So what you perceive is some indication of a proof. But to think that only perception matters would be also creating its own problems.
Well, that's very limited vision.
Well, it's basically saying because I feel good, therefore what I believe is correct.
Yeah, that can be criticized validly very easily. Not very easily, but it can,
Sure, but it takes takes a higher knowledge to be able to criticize that.
Here's one of the things that Prabhupada emphasized, that as conditioned souls, we have 4 defects. 1 is we tend to be an illusion. 2, we tend to make mistakes. 3, we have imperfect senses. And 4, we tend to cheat. That's Shastra when we're conditioned souls. And so anything that
we're showing in the background now, Antariksa Das speaking at the synagogue where I had my bar mitzvah at an interfaith, and he requests everybody to raise their hands and chant Hare Krishna, and miraculously they did it. So I bring it to the end. So I scrolled it. Somehow all these people here to this man, I put the link and he's saying, please chant with me, raise your hands. And I was looking, I'm the one who set him up for this. I was looking like, you're crazy, man. No one's going to do it. But miraculously everyone did it.
Not everyone, but a good majority of people did.
I think everyone stood and did it. Like you'll see, they didn't stand, but you see people, you press them if you please raise your hand, chant with me. And I was there like, oh man, no one's going to do it. But But you see, most people
I use the progression.
Even the Mormons in front. You even got the Mormons in front raising their hands.
That wasn't my goal to get people to raise their hands. I wanted to encourage appreciation of the beautiful building we are in, the beautiful universe we're in, and isn't it worth raising your hands to God? And here's my humble way of praising God, is to chant the Hare Krishna mantra, like I've been taught from Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada.
There was another one, standing up for each other in difficult times. This was at the Bharati Hindu temple, and it was, I think, during the Trump immigration ban. And so interfaith was a regular interfaith where people presented, but then there was the concept of standing up for each other at difficult times, of which Antariska Das was one of the presenters. And here's another one at
that was after I got chastised by the board in Detroit, remember?
Well, I mean, they didn't appreciate you doing this. That you had the one.
They didn't appreciate the interfaith. They didn't appreciate my criticism.
It was at Hartford Memorial Baptist.
Yeah, that was nice.
Church.
Yeah,
and I have to look. There was another one that got the most views that had where you actually recited the verse of Lord Chaitanya, and that was in front of the. I think your camera went off again. If you want to.
Yeah, why did you keep doing that, David? There we go.
And the other one where they had the Redwood, the Universalist Unitarian Church in Detroit that had like the 100-year-old Redwood that was pipes,
nice.
And that one they actually shared on Dandavans and ended up getting hundreds of views. But it's like none of those. Okay, so we stood up for each other to say, okay, like I was arguing on the stream I was earlier with Charles Moskowitz I talk with every Thursday, who's a pretty serious Zionist supporter of Israel, and talking about like, oh, he's an anti-Semite because he doesn't support Israel. And so I said, if a Palestinian man who was an activist in supporting Palestine against Israel was getting beat up on the street, and I decide like, don't beat up that Palestinian man and defend him and stop it, does that make me anti-Israel because I saved a Palestinian man?
What did he say?
Well, I mean, he agreed with that tenet, but saying so when we had when the Trump tried passing the immigration ban and the Bharati Temple, the interfaith had standing up for each other. And he said, like, no, like I don't want these guys deported. Like I may not, like at a certain level, there was a commonality, like the Ahimsa principle. We don't want to see other people suffering, but none of them really got to the point of what is truth, how do we get to truth, and so it's interesting.
And now you know why.
Well, I mean, because Jennifer's theory of prana, or learning from perception, or even back to the dueling. Because unfortunately,
no, because truth is very simple, and most people want to complicate it. And when they realize how simple it is, they get cognitive dissonance and personally offended in their egos, and then it turns into conflict.
Well, Antariksa, I probably got about 20 minutes left on my 20-hour max. We had a long conversation over 3 hours. You met some of the people that I talk with. Jennifer isn't even in the same country as me, but we've been talking every week and she does have a background in physics. And one of the main reasons I got interested in physics is the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium and understanding cosmology. And in fact, Michael Cremo, Arjun, the devotees in New Zealand I spoke to, I mentioned that when Michael Cremo came to Detroit, I drove him around. I picked him up in Detroit. I took him to University of Michigan to speak there.
Did they let him speak?
Yeah, I helped. I was part of the Bhakti Yoga Society.
That's what happened.
And then I took him to Lansing, where Antariska Das had made an event at a bookstore. And then, with Krishna Shakti, we went into a Mediterranean restaurant and got vegetarian food. And then we went to Antariksa's house and talked till about 2 in the morning. But that was Antariksa is a devotee in his own way, but like Jennifer,
did I tell you that
my background is in physics, and that's why me and Jennifer have been successful, because we're more interested in the science of consciousness through a scientific investigation. And Prabhupada actually was one of his most important projects. Like Antariska Das was sent to Kalamazoo and Lansing to open up a temple because he didn't have a degree in physics, but what Jennifer is doing, even if she disagrees with Prabhupada ISKCON, is in line with one of his prime directives, which was understanding the Vedic conception of consciousness and cosmology.
Scientifically.
Yeah, and God bless Jennifer, smart woman who actually has a degree in physics also.
Yes. One of my when I had Michael, I knew the second person in command of the anthropology department at MSU, one of my alma maters, and I asked her if I could have Michael speak, and they put the clamps on her. They wouldn't let him come and speak. I said, Lana, what? Are you kidding me? That you're afraid of Michael Cremo, Adutta Karma's book, Forbidden Archaeology? And they were, because Sariputta and him were smart enough to know about knowledge filters, how knowledge filters work when it comes to dishonesty related to scientific theories. And that's why he wasn't allowed to speak at Michigan State. And I don't think he was allowed to speak at a very big platform at U of M either.
Well, we just rented a room, and
yeah.
I mean, it was Uma Devi Dasi, who was the president then, and right. Actually a professor of archaeology who was unbeknownst to us, saw the advertisement for Michael Cremo and came, and part of the class came. So it wasn't someone who came to the Bhakti Yoga events, but it was actually a professor of archaeology that had seen one of our flyers about him coming and had even told the class that it was an interesting thing. So actually U of M, I mean, we could have rented a room. We were a student club, and, like we had Roma Pot or whatever, we could rent a room and bring in whatever speaker we want, as long as they're not like, racism or cancel culture or something like that. But no, actually at U of M, an archaeology professor even came and told the students that this man had interesting insights.
Well, my friend would have come, but she didn't come to the bookstore thing, but she wasn't allowed to let him speak to the department, any form of the department.
Well, yeah, I mean, that we probably couldn't have arranged, but we were able to rent a room and had, I think, like 20 people, reasonable turnout.
What that experience said to me was that there's a lot of dishonesty in so-called scientific circles and on the planet, in the higher systems of higher learning, because they get billions of dollars to pursue proving a certain theory. So, and that's my argument with medicine right now, is like there's billions and billions of dollars to be made looking at health problems in a certain way.
Yeah, but they're just generally interested. I was mentioning that, like Jennifer is a critic of ISKCON, her guru is a critic of ISKCON, but she is defending Vedic science and does have a background in physics. And that's largely why I'm a fan of ISKCON. I'm not an initiated disciple, but I'm able to work together with her due to my low conflict nature, interfaith training to be respectful, and some sort of larger mutual desire to advance the Vedic science, even if we're from, so to say, different schools.
Yeah. Also to help people out too, right?
Well, I mean, that's more my Judaism. Say, like, I like helping people, being a good person. I'm happy to help people, but I was like that before I came on to Krishna consciousness. That was largely from my Jewish training. My interest in Vedic cosmology comes from ISKCON.
My first degree is in social work, and it's served me well all throughout my life, and it still does. One of my faults is I have trouble listening, but I'm working on it. The most important book that I remember from my social work training for 4 years at Indiana University back in the early 70s was The Awesome Power of the Listening Ear.
Yeah, it's an important skill, like for streaming or just in general. You have to actually pay attention. You have to put active effort to listen. Listening takes effort in your average person. If there's some sort of value proposition, like why should I put this effort to try to understand? And if like interfaith, that it's okay, like I'm just going to be respectful, shake a few hands, meet some people, and and now we got our back, and we have friends in different communities. Versus saying that, like, no, I mean, Islam, let alone like competing schools of Vedic philosophy, to say like Islam, Judaism, different Christian traditions. I honestly want to listen and understand what the other person says. We talked about respect largely being the a prerequisite for interfaith, that if you don't have respect, it's going to be hard to listen and desire to understand the person. And not so much like, obviously, like, if you're a Jew representing Judaism and interfaith, you don't want to, interfaiths aren't about converting people. There is no choir. It's largely all preachers, and you're not going to win converts and change the people representing the various schools to change to the other various schools. It's not the purpose of interfaith. It's the purpose to learn, understand, build community. But there is also an interfaith where, like, no, we do have to debate these topics. We do have to wrestle with truth. In order to wrestle with truth, it requires me to attack your belief system and say, like, nah, I'm sorry, what you're saying just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't sound true. And for you to be able to do that to me.
Yeah, the latter part's the most, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just respect is the only element that's missing, but it's the prerequisite.
No, well, it's like if the forces in North Viet or Vietnamese sit down with the Allied forces at the table in Paris, they had the process was arguing about the shape of the table. And then finally they did sit down, and it was a whole mistake from my humble point of view, but it happened. And now Vietnam and U.S. are trading partners, and people that fought and killed each other have good relationships, actually.
So why don't we wrap up? I'll let Jennifer say any final words, and then I'll conclude with Antariksa. I got over 3 hours of Antariksa, so people, I got 40 minutes, his whole bio, probably even people who know Antariksa, people who are part of ISKCON, probably know things, about the history of ISKCON in Michigan they never heard. But let me let Jennifer just make any concluding remarks, and then I'll hand it over to Antariksa.
Thanks for having me on and facilitating an important conversation. And nice to meet you, Antariksa, and I'll talk to you very soon, Sunday, if not sooner. Dovid.
Me and Jennifer have a weekly show every
What
Sunday.
time is it? On this channel right here?
On her channel. And in fact, I used to
How do I find it? Will you send it to me?
I'll send you. Her channel's called Church of Entropy, but I used to go to Detroit ISKCON and stay till the end. And then I started streaming with her, and we were streaming like 9 o'clock. I would stay and chant, and then COVID-19 happened. We started streaming at 7 o'clock. It's been Sunday night. If I start going back to the temple, like in chanting, maybe we'll move it back to 8 or 9, and then she's back and forth between Canada and New Zealand. So I guess if she's in New Zealand, it's early in the morning. That we're halfway around the world, so the time differences are vary. But it's basically Sunday night, and we usually carry on for hours. And it's our common belief in spirituality, science, reincarnation, the mystery of consciousness, and respect for the Vedas that keep us going.
No, I want to apologize. I get pretty passionate,
Well, I wanted to too, because I was saying, like, you are from opposing schools, and I wanted to, that debate to happen a little bit. And I always joke to Jennifer that she's a Mayavadi.
For me to get too passionate. That's what I'm
for
saying.
2 years now,
I don't want you to be afraid of me, Jennifer.
2 years now, I've been jokingly or even seriously calling Jennifer.
I'm not afraid of you at all.
Thank you, and I'm not afraid of you.
She's not afraid of anything, let alone you. But like, no, I mean, I did want to, I did want to hear you and her debate. What is a Mayavadi?
No, I think it's a good example of where I want to go with my involvement with interfaith. I'm not interested in just shaking hands. It's okay. I'm interested in shaping a table, but I want to get. I enjoy.
I assume Leon will be mostly like DION, and no, it's not going to be debate like this. That's probably even better for internet. It might even be better for streaming these debates, because in public, if you do have a bunch of priests and Muslims, it probably will be exactly like Rabbi Dorit, where it's just a bunch of people respectfully making presentations one after the next.
I think there's value in that, but it's avoiding tougher things.
Well, it's because it's Leon. It's the Lansing interfaith, Detroit interfaith. And the point is, like, no, we're not enemies. We're not fighting each other. We respect each other. And it's a venue to learn a little bit more about each other and meet each other, not necessarily a venue to debate, whose tradition is superior. So that you're doing, or more true, and that superior is the wrong word, but you're saying the truth. So that might be more important. But like, no, interfaith is not about, debates about truth. And usually you can't have like 10 different religions debating. If you were going to have such a debate, it usually has to be limited to two or just a very few, because you're really going to have Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Christians, all these various people in some like royal rumble of who has the truth. So interfaith is basically like DION, where it's respectful presentations for people to meet each other in friendly way and learn more about the tradition. Even debate might be better for online, because debate in public could have a tendency towards higher levels of conflict or even violence that God forbid, because attacking a person's religion or scripture could be a severe offense in many people's eyes. So thank God, like we're hundreds, thousands of miles away. Antariksa may be a Prabhupada disciple, may carry some weight. It may have caused Jennifer's computer to freeze, but no, I mean, it's not. You can't reach through the computer and strangle somebody, God forbid.
No, I've been feeling a lack in the effort of working with Rabbi. I like to work with Rabbi Dorit, and I'm happy that she's willing to do the lambing.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, these people are, we call it trolling online, and so it's like no, I mean, and if you did it in a public, interface, like it's done at a place of worship, and everybody there, when they enter the door, usually has the agreed upon respect. If we did it on a street corner, the majority of the people will probably not have the respect level, and might even be confrontational. So the internet also has, when we do it, if you did a recorded program and put it up live later, and put it up later for people to see, as opposed to doing it live, which allows the possibility of people who just don't like you very much to come there and not only to harass you and try to derail the conversation, but it's more real, because it's like Harinam. Like you could do Harinam, and there might be quite a few people who take prasad and like it, but there's also people who are going to come and be like, get out of here, what are you doing here? And so that's
like I said in my bio, I got a death threat. I didn't take it too. I took it seriously, of course. I didn't like that it happened, but what can I do? What can you do about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't talk about. I mean, but like like we had Henry Doctorski on the channel saying like, no, I mean, people tried to beat up, even Tirtha, people tried to beat up and shut down New Vrindavan, such to the point that Kirtananda Swami had to recruit serial killers, God forbid, just to keep the devotees safe.
I don't think he had to recruit serial killers.
He probably did. I was saying, no, I mean, they were beating him up. I was saying they would have driven him out of town if he wasn't able to recruit people that were capable of defending the devotees. I mean, we have to argue about that, but the certain point that like the safety of a place of worship where the respect is assumed, or the the internet where it's just a person trolling to trying to establish a community somewhere where people might not want you there and even try to kill you, God forbid.
Yeah, well, that's that's just being in the world. I think anything that promotes agreeing to disagree is just that mood of, okay, like Edmund Burke, the old Englishman, I disagree with what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it. That wisdom is almost going away. I think this channel can produce, you guys, Jennifer, you and David are definitely not saying, my way or the highway at all, and I appreciate that a lot. But anyways, I'm tired.
So if you want to give any concluding remarks to anyone who
I just
has the power to sit through 3.5 hours of that, just some concluding remarks, feel free, and then we'll end the stream.
You say that to me or to Jennifer?
But she already gave her to you. Okay,
well, I just want to say I thank you, David, for having me on. And I'm the caretaker for the Michigan Society for Cow Protection, a nonprofit. I have some ideas myself about where to go with the energy that we might put into it to make it more active. And I'm interested in anybody that wants to sit on a board or just do anything related to that. It's no big rush, of course. That, and then I'm also interested. I have a little center here in Lansing, Michigan. So I'm happy that we made the distinction between preliminary. I like the idea of preliminary interfaith, and then actually having debate, having dialogue to get at the truth about God, if you will, even not about God, but we,
I think we lost him again, and I think it's the thing that probably his like 15 or 30 minutes. He doesn't touch your computer. You have to touch the screen to make sure that doesn't happen. So if you, I did also offer Antariksa to help him use StreamYards if he wants to start streaming on his own. And he has a YouTube channel that doesn't have too many followers so far, but it's in the description if anyone wants to follow it. And I volunteered to help him out with his tech. Yeah, I think you probably have like a automatic that turns your screen off after so much time. I don't know what it is.
I've never experienced.
I know what it is. I was saying if you don't touch your screen or anything for a certain amount of time, so you're talking, we're live, but you didn't touch your computer for a certain amount of time, so it probably shuts down the screen.
That's first time.
But I was saying that I'm happy to help you out with the technology if you want to stream, and we could have more conversations like this on my channel, or said if you want to continue with your activity live streaming for your own purposes, I'm happy to walk you through the easiest way to do that. And Jennifer's also very helpful like that. And we even help out our opposition usually. Like I like helping out people who like me and agree with me and want to help me, but I even help out people generally that don't like me and even sometimes try to harm me. Sometimes I help them out too.
Oh my gosh.
Because Antariksa, because Lord Chaitanya, we said, what's the verse about humbler than a blade of grass?
Well, here it is. It's the second Shashastika, the third Shashastika. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige. I guess that implies there can be some real prestige there. And then and ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy names of the Lord constantly. That's the third Shashastika.
Hare Krishna. You want to say it in Sanskrit, and then I'll end the stream?
No, I don't.
Okay, so that's good enough. We'll end the stream on a positive note.
Jennifer,
one of the things that
pleasure.
Antariksha taught me that helped change my life, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Okay, Hare Krishna, everybody. Thanks for coming on.